across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Well, hello, good morning. Welcome to the show. Alex Phillips here, sitting in for Julia Hartley-Brewer. Today, I'm going to be with you until 1 o'clock. And we have a lot to get our teeth into, don't we? I don't know about you, I am very suspicious about the police behaviour surrounding protests outside migrant hotels. I think something funny's going on. Very funny. I mean, what on earth can it mean when the police seem to be escorting counter-protesters into the heart of a protest and then standing and watch it all kick off as if that wouldn't happen? It's a bit like seeing a pool of oil and going, ooh, how about I light this match and take the match to the oil? What do they think's going to happen when they have two sides clashing? And in some of the videos circulating online, there are the police going, come on by, come on this way, lads, escorting protesters who all have balaclavas on, or hats and face masks. And yet it turns out that actually covering your face at a protest is illegal. And the police have every right to turn around and say, you have to remove that mask so you can be identified. We are up for peaceful protest, but not for militant activism. And yet the people that they're videoed escorting across the road in one particular piece of footage that's allegedly filmed at a protest by Aldershot shows quite the opposite. It shows quite frightening looking men donned in all their facial coverings like ninjas or paramilitary mercenaries, with the police saying, come on, get into the heart of it. There's the people standing there, mums and daughters and aunties and grannies holding signs saying, we're worried about our kids. Why don't you just get right in the middle there, mix it up a bit? So I put something on X last night, and I put this, if this is another police force doing this, then it seems to me that this is maybe a nationwide order, an instruction, a tactic, perhaps a state-backed tactic. I don't know. I think we ought to know, because I'll level this to you. If it turns out that there is some sort of shadowy operational command saying, how about we infiltrate these protests with people who are going to make them inflammatory, and then as a result of things getting a little bit edgy, we can then use force to shut it down and throw some people in prison, that would deter anybody else from going out and protesting. I find that harrowing, chilling. So I put that online. I asked the question because I don't know. I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. I'm just seeing what I see and asking a valid question. And some pretty interesting, significant people have not just interacted with it, but retweeted it, which makes me think there might be some validity to my concerns. And if there are, what I then want to know is, did you use the same tactic for protests after what happened in Southport? Because I remember those riots. I was sitting in this seat day after day, and I saw mums and dads going out with placards and banners saying, save our kids, and we don't like what's going on. We're worried about the safety of our communities, the integrity of our society, the security of our children, especially our daughters, which is a very valid concern to have when you go online and you see day after day after day after day after day, news story after news story of someone in an asylum hotel attacking a little child or harassing women, then you think this is perfectly within their rights to stand up and say this has gone too far. But if the government are then trying to turn these protests into riots, deliberately to lock them down, to clamp down, to show power of oppression, what does that mean for the people arrested during Southport riots? Ask yourself that. No, don't ask yourself. Ask your government that. Get your MP to look into it, because something funny is going on, I'm sure of it. Let's speak now to Sarah Pochin, MP Reform, UK's MP for Runcorn and Helsby. Good morning, Sarah.
Good morning, Alex. Lovely to speak to you this morning.
Great to speak to you. Now, let's start off where I've just finished there, which is the Essex Police handling of these protests in Epping. The Essex Police Chief has rejected calls to resign, sort of didn't really respond at all in this press conference that we were all glued to get an explanation of why the police were escorting what looked like pretty hardline activists to the protest site. He just said we were facilitating the rights for these people to express themselves. And yet a lot of them didn't look like concerned parents. There were among those who the police seemed to escort to the protest site some rather menacing looking individuals.
Yeah, absolutely, Alex. I mean, I watched the footage too. I saw his interview. He came across to me as extremely weak. He waffled. But we saw with our own eyes, didn't we, the pictures of the police escorting, is the word they use, into the protest, into the heart of the protest. As you said, masked men. I've been criticised left, right and centre for my burqa question and my point, the debate I've been trying to raise about face coverings on the streets and it hampering the police doing their job. And yet, and I've been criticised for that, of course, and yet here we are watching the police complicit in escorting people with face coverings into a highly volatile situation. And then they said they bust them out for their own safety. Well, can you imagine the police escorting me and bussing me out of a situation? Absolutely not, because I'm somebody that is representing the views of the British people, the views of the parents that actually wanted to quietly protest and make their points that they don't feel comfortable to let their children out on the streets at the moment, and yet those people are being shut down. And I have to say, I fully support Nigel Farage's call for this Chief Constable Harrington to resign. I mean, absolutely extraordinary behaviour. And the other thing, Alex, is I'm sure you know, Reform and myself are fronting up a summer campaign of what we would do to make people feel safer on our streets. And one of the main things that we need to see is police that behave impartially, not supporting protesters like Antifa. We're talking about far left groups here, really, really menacing groups into the heart of a protest.
But what we now have is Parliament's gone on holiday. Sir Keir Starmer's sipping a cocktail at the side of a swimming pool so much. I don't know where he is or what he's doing. He probably isn't. I don't think he's that much fun. But we're now in a position where for about 6 weeks, it's essentially unaccountable. So if you wanted to ask the question, is this a state-backed operational instruction? Is this what happened after Southport? What are we going to do when the police are saying that they're not ready for a summer of unrest? If we start getting reciprocal little protests happening outside migrant hotels, they're then infiltrated either from thugs, local thugs and hooligans who want to have a jolly chucking missiles at police, or from hard left activists like Antifa, that the police, who are already going to be stretched in normal operational duties, just won't be able to deal with this. And yet, where is Parliament? Do you think we're getting to the point that Parliament needs to be recalled? Because some serious questions need to be asked. We need leadership.
Well, we've been asking for the situation on the migrant crisis to be declared a state of national emergency. It clearly is a state of national emergency. And what do I mean by that? I mean that we need to have Cobra meetings. We need to get Parliament back potentially. I don't disagree with you. We need to be involving the military potentially. We need to get the Navy in the Channel. We either turn these boats back or we just don't accept them at all. Why don't we just pull our border force out of the Channel? What do the French do when they get to the bit of water that suddenly becomes British waters? What are they going to do? Just abandon these no longer small boats, these very large boats with, 80 young fighting-aged men on them? What are they going to do? So let's do something drastic, because we cannot go on like this. And you're right, Parliament is in recess, but it certainly doesn't stop people like me and my Reform colleagues from speaking loudly on this issue. But Yeah, absolutely. If Parliament needs to be recalled, so it should. This is an emergency now that this country is facing.
Why is it, do you think, that as a nation, we seem to offer people who have broken into our country so many privileges, so many nice things? You know, when you look at scenes in Calais from where these people have originally come after traipsing across various countries of Europe, in fact, when you look at scenes in places like Greece, for instance, migrants are either rough sleeping or they're sleeping in big hangars that have mattresses on the floor. In Calais, they're in bin bag bivouacs among sand dunes. They're not in hotels. And yet here, they're getting 4-star hotels. They're getting all-you-can-eat buffets, full board and accommodation. They're getting phones. They have to pick between whether they want a Samsung or an iPhone when they arrive. They're given up to 50 quid a week pocket money to spend. They're given these prepaid cards that they're supposed to be using to buy food or whatever. Lord knows why when they're given food anyway in the hotel. And they're taking them and using them in betting shops and casinos. Most of them are working on the black market, not paying any tax, not having to pay rent, not having to buy any of the things they need to keep themselves alive. Probably they're earning more per week than the average person in the United Kingdom. A lot of them are working in illegal parts of the market. I mean, why on earth, as a nation, are we so stupid that we think that that is the way to treat people who have broken into your country? Because you go to other parts of the world, and I'll tell you this, Sarah, if I were to try and cross the border from India to Pakistan without a visa, I'd probably be shot. Now, I'm not saying we do that in Britain, but why are we so crazy that we're giving these people luxury? Luxury.
At our expense, at the expense of the British taxpayer. And the fact is, in this country, we have a whole industry, and I talk about this all the time. We have allowed an industry to grow up around us of far left, woke lawyers, human rights lawyers, that are making a fortune out of this whole issue. Now, the fact is that Germany and Greece and all the other countries that you talked about, they also are supposedly part of the ECHR, as are we, and we use that all the time and say, oh, well, you know, these people have got a right to a human life and a right to British chicken nuggets and a right to whatever else nonsense that we have to listen to. But the fact is, the other European countries are now turning against this. They're turning against the ECHR. We all agree that that has to change. Well, we all agree, apart from 14 years of the Tory government and this atrocious Labour government. They don't seem to agree with any of that at all. And yet Reform have been saying for a long time, the first thing we'll do when we get into power is start the process of removing ourselves from the ECJ, from the ECHR. But the fact is, Alex, we can stop this crisis now. It doesn't matter that we're still in the ECHR. Every single person that makes it to the shores of this country should be scooped up, deported, and then dealt with. Their asylum claims then dealt with in somewhere very uncomfortable, without Sky TV, without mobile phones, without free driving lessons and 3 hot meals a day. There are British families that are struggling to feed their own children. They can't afford to give them 3 hot meals a day. And yet these migrants, that's what they get.
Where would you deport them to? Where would you deport them to? Because is this sort of like you suggesting something similar to the Rwanda plan, where they are processed in a third country, or would you use some sort of British overseas territory, or even somewhere in the United Kingdom where you could build one sort of giant detention centre? Where would you send these people to for processing?
Look, this is a direction of travel that Reform want to move in, and we've been very clear about it. Personally, if it's my decision, I wouldn't let them into the United Kingdom. So they set foot on our beach and they are immediately taken off to somewhere, either let's say for British foreign territory, or it doesn't really matter. It could be a great big container ship in the middle of the channel. You know, I don't really care, but the point is they don't come into this country. We need to do that deal clearly with a territory to hold them whilst we process them. And we all know they've all chucked their papers in the channel, so they lie and lie and lie about which country they're from. If they don't get if they don't get asylum because they say they're from Syria, they then decide they're from, Afghanistan. And if that doesn't work, they'll decide that they're from Eritrea. This process goes on for years and years and years. But I tell you what, if we deport them somewhere very uncomfortable without all of this soft, free nonsense, then we will start to send a message in the same way that Australia has made it work. Other countries have made it work. We have a small border. We're an island.
What would you say to people?
Island?
What would you say to people who said that's inhumane? There are women and children among these numbers. There are people who are genuine asylum seekers who are fleeing wars from countries that Britain has had foreign policy activities in. What would you say to those people who turn around and say that is just cruel? You can't treat a human being like that. They deserve some dignity. They've risked their lives to get here. They are fleeing persecution or whatever. I mean, what about those people?
Look, well, I've made it very clear several times that when it comes to genuine refugees, like, for example, I met several of the Afghan interpreters that worked alongside our British Special Forces and our British military. And of course, they need, and their family need to be given safe haven here on our shores. And there's no question about that. But you look at this latest Afghan scandal, cover-up, betrayal, again, of the British people, cover-up by the Tory government of these 18,000 plus Afghans that are coming in. We know that the Afghan interpreters stroke Afghan special forces numbered, 1,000 to 1,500 that worked alongside the British forces. And yet we're being told that 18,000 have come in under the cover of darkness. The British people are not stupid. We will always give a safe haven to those that need it. Look how generous the British people have been to the Ukrainians when the war broke out in Europe. It's in our nature to do that, but we will not have the mickey taken out of us, and that is what's happening now. These are not, look at those boats, 80 odd young fighting age men. We don't know who they are. They're clearly not vetted. They could be terrorists. We know that they're 4 times more likely to rape and sexually assault women. We're letting them into the country. That's not women and children and families. You only have to look at the pictures constantly shown to us by the news teams. These are not families. These are young men, and they pose a threat to our society.
Sarah Pochin, thank you ever so much. Reform UK's MP for Runcorn and Helsby. I'm sure a lot of you out there listening to Sarah's words think, finally, a politician who seems to get it. I don't understand why we're supposed to have some duty of care to anybody. No other country has a duty of care to another country. I'm sorry, we left our former colonies almost a century ago now. If they haven't been able to sort themselves out, what's that got to do with us? That's just how I feel about this. As a woman who's lived in Ghana, lived in Kenya, lived in India, worked in Nigeria, spent a lot of time in Cameroon, I'm sorry, but it's not our responsibility anymore if your government can't make your country function. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but what do you think about all of this? What about whether police are working at some sort of operational level to infiltrate protests? Look, I don't know if this is going on. I don't know. I just want that question answered. If any of you have expertise in that area, if you've been a copper and you might know something about this sort of tactic, if it is being deployed, then I would love to hear from you. 0344499 1000 is the number to call to share your pearls of wisdom. You can also use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, write talk before you text. I'm on X at Talk TV, and I'm back just after this.
if you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. As it were, the working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, hello. Let's do some of your messages and then take some calls, shall we? Maybe at the next pro-Palestine protest, the far-right opposite protesters could be escorted in to give a fair counter-protest. There you go, Pete in Lincolnshire. Yeah, what would happen then? If we all got to stand in the middle and go, we don't care about your blimmin' Hamas sympathies, we don't care about your Islamism, go away. But would the police allow us in? No, of course not. So parents with concerns about their children's safety following various mainly sexual incidents involving migrants are not allowed to carry out a peaceful protest. Yet Keir Starmer was so concerned about a few reporters outside his house who might disturb his child's GCSE revision, he arranged for him to move temporarily into a swish flat in Covent Garden. He's made no comment on the recent protests, and Khan still treats any questions regarding rape gangs in London with total disdain. Concerns regarding safety are just a bit of noise to them. No comparison. Look after our kids. Every child needs to be protected. These are serious issues. I'm sorry. When it's little girls being harassed and assaulted by men, full-grown foreign men, why does no one in that blimmin' building in 10 Downing Street, why does no one in Whitehall take that seriously? I'm sorry. Are the women and girls in this country insignificant? Are we all asking for it? Do you not care? Are we all racist if we don't let the next man who's hopped off a dinghy rape us? For crying out loud. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's the most distorted sense of morality. It makes me sick. Let's speak now to Chris, who's in Manchester. Now, Chris, my producer, Ted, tells me I was sort of asking if there was any police out there who might be able to explain the handling of this incident by Essex police. Apparently, that's you.
I won't necessarily say it's me, but I'm retired. I've been retired for 12 years. However, I do think we need to add a little bit of balance to this debate. I don't agree with Chief Constable Harrington's views that the police are there to facilitate free expression or freedom of speech. That's not their role. Their role is to maintain the peace. However, when you're faced with a group of individuals, for instance, who arrive at the police station, which, as I understand these protesters did, you have one of three choices. You either allow them to continue on their own, unhindered, you kettle them if you've got sufficient resources, or the third option, the most preferred option, is that you escort them to where they want to go to ensure that disorder doesn't break out, rather like you would do that with a group of football fans. I listened earlier to Mike's analogy of the Millwall football fans. Well, I'm afraid that is precisely what you would do. You would escort them safely to wherever they want to go to ensure that you maintain order. Now, with regard to the wearing of face masks, they should have been removed. However, you have to consider that the officers will have conducted that operation bearing in mind the amount of resources that they have got. And if they don't have sufficient resources, for instance, to detain them, to kettle them, or to be more sort of proactive with them, I get them to remove face masks, then you do what you do at the time. I'm
trying to just wrap my head around this, because they seemed to me to be relatively calm, peaceful, family-oriented protests. There might have been a few wrong-uns who got involved, hooligans who were there just to cause trouble. But then when these counter-protesters rocked up at the police station, I don't understand why they can't just make their own way to the protest site. But when they did, that's when it all kicked off. So I don't understand why that is some sort of operational tactic.
Well, past experiences has told me that if you allow people, a group of people, such as the ones that we are talking about, to make their own way, the likelihood is that some kind of a disorder will happen. And essentially what the police officers would have been faced with is a split-second decision, or an instantaneous decision, as to what they will do. Now, there must have been a breakdown of police intelligence, because ordinarily you would have had intelligence that a number of people were arriving, for instance, on a train. As I understand it, they arrived at the train station. Now, you would have thought that our colleagues in British Transport Police or the various other intelligence sources would have identified that a group of people were arriving at a particular location and that there may be a public order issue. Now, I get the impression that didn't happen. The officers on the ground would have been faced with that situation, and they would have... The police use a system of command and control called gold, silver and bronze, and the bronze or silver commander would have been asked, we've got a group of people at the railway station, they are intending on going to this hotel as a counter-protest. We propose that we escort them there in order to maintain order. And in almost certainly that suggestion would have been confirmed by those in a position to make that order. I do think that it sounded like that the officers on the ground were being thrown under the bus by Chief Constable Harrington when he said that it wasn't a command decision. I suspect it was a command decision, albeit an inadvertent one, because they were faced with a situation that they had to make a decision to do something. The officers on the ground are obviously in the best position to make that decision at the time.
Chris, thank you so much for calling in. Fascinating insights. I mean, I don't understand the operational tactics of the police at all. So it's really good to be able to speak to someone who's able to explain a little bit more about some of the rationale, perhaps, behind the footage that we're seeing circulating online. Let's speak now to Daniel, who's in Epsom. Good morning, Daniel.
Alex, great show. You look amazing today, by the way.
Oh, do I? Thank you. I feel, honestly, I thought I looked like a bag of spanners, if I'm honest with you, but I'll take the compliment.
It's the glasses.
Oh, I just took them off. Here you go. Shall I put them back on? My sexy secretary look. There you go.
So everyone's talking about the micro. Well, let's move them out of hotels and let's put these illegal invaders into houses now, 6 or 7 at a time. That's what we'll do. That'll fix it. I think while we're all concentrating on the micro, the macro issue, the biggest issue in the UK today is that mass immigration from the third world is basically destroying the fabric of our country, okay? It's ruining Britain, and we all know it, okay?
Yeah.
And the people that work for us directly will not listen to us or do anything about it. That is at the heart of all of the protests and all of these issues, is that the people, us, the British majority, can see the decline and degradation in our own country, okay? And we didn't want it. We didn't ask for it. We voted against mass immigration, but we've still got it.
Yeah.
This one issue bleeds into all other issues.
Yeah.
Why is there not enough housing? Why can't I let my little girl go to the cinema today on public transport? Because I'm frightened to. Because I'm worried, even in places like this, you see groups of men from the third world roaming around. You know, this so-called multicultural society that no one ever wanted or asked for is now here, and we're having to put up with it. I'm having to change the way that we live because governments won't listen to me, and that's happening to me today.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I'll tell you what, as one of aforementioned women in this country, I have to change the way I live all the time. Change the way I live so much, I'm moving out of London. I'm actually going, because I just can't tolerate it anymore. I don't want to live in a country where I walk down my street and feel on edge. It's just not normal. And this is what I was shouting about earlier. Why this government thinks that at the bottom of the pecking order are little girls, that's completely the opposite of what it should be. It's disgusting. What is wrong with these grown men? They got no spine, no leadership, no backbone, that they let little girls in their country feel unsafe. Little girls. Disgusting. I don't know how these people look at themselves in the mirror. Daniel, thank you ever so much for your call, my darling. Right, you'll be pleased to know we're going to inject some gravelly-voiced gravitas into the heart of the matter now. We're going to escort it straight into the middle of the debate, because after the break, I'm joined by the one and only Mr. Peter Blexley.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I want to really understand what is going on with policing when it comes to protests in this country. And I don't just want to know for now, for Essex and Epping Forest, or the other videos circulating online that allege were filmed at places like Aldershot, where police equally seem to be escorting men in full-on ballies, looking like they mean to do some serious harm to a protest site where women are amassed. I want to know what went on a year ago in Southport, where seemingly, and I don't know if I'm wearing a tinfoil hat here, I don't know if I'm going to get my collar felt for stirring up conspiracy, but I remember those protests started as just protests and ramped up, and maybe that is the way that things go organically, that people sort of go, hey up, there's a protest down there, let's go and cause some trouble. And we were told, weren't we, back then, that members of football hooligan societies, far-right organisations were being bussed in from around the country. And yet we were never presented with any evidence that that was the case. Quite the contrary. Let's speak now to Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, because Peter, you and I sat here in the studio together over the weekend, and you were the first person to say, I've seen the videos, Essex police were bringing these counter-protesters into the heart of the protest. Spoke to former policeman Chris from Manchester earlier, who said, well, actually, that is potentially, operational protocol. And I'm there thinking, I don't get this. I don't understand why you would allow a load of militant activists, okay, some of them were those funny women with the chunky jewellery and the sort of 1980s hairstyle who seemingly have some sort of psychopathic overindulgent empathy towards migrants. But some of the other people looked pretty freaky to me. So I don't understand the thought process behind going, oh, here's a sort of calm-looking protest. Let's get all these wrong-uns in the middle of it.
Yeah, I was listening to Chris when he called in. Was interesting what he had to say. And in essence, he is saying a lot of what Chief Constable Ben Julian Harrington of Essex Police said yesterday. And to a point, they are both right. Protest, of course, peaceful protest, is a core fundamental of being British. It's the very essence of Britishness, one might argue. But that right, that privilege to be allowed to peaceful protest does not come at the expense of crime, of creating disorder, of manufacturing situations whereby there could be harm caused, people injured and property damaged. Now, Essex Police, when they walked that group of protesters towards the demonstration near the Bell Hotel in Epping, they knew they were creating a situation that would undoubtedly become heated. But they, in their fluffiness, in their wokeness, they decided that allowing that peaceful protest was more important than potentially creating a situation where there would be disorder. Hear me out just for a moment. Let's flip those circumstances. Imagine if the large demonstration of 1,000 people or so was your stand up to racism, Antifa kind of mob. Imagine if it was the other way round. And say 50 men in Dr. Martens boots, turned up jeans, T-shirts, braces, bald heads, and carrying the Cross of St. George flags turned up in a situation identical but reversed. Would they have been allowed to get as close to the larger demonstration or not? Of course they wouldn't. They would have been surrounded, they would have been kettled in exactly the same way that a group of those kind of protesters were kettled on Westminster Bridge when there was a pro-Palestine march going on not so long ago.
Does this come down to sort of cock-up where it's, woke policing? Oh, the left wing, it must be nice because they're on the side of good and righteousness. And if you're shouting that refugees are wonderful people, despite the fact you might look like you're going to shoot someone when you go home, then, you're a good person. Is it simply that? Or is there something funny going on? Because I think back to Southport, and there were all of a sudden, you saw that, I've looked at so many still pictures and so many videos, and you got your big sort of red-faced man with his beer belly, shouting, can of lager in hand, about to throw it at someone, your ragtag, you know, scrappy little geezer with his hoodie up. But then you seem to have people who were dressed like ninjas, like paramilitary in there. And I'm like, who were they? Where did they come from? And we were told back then, oh, it's the far right. They've been bussed in around the country. And it wasn't, as far as I'm aware. We were never given any evidence. There were never arrests of sort of organisers of football hooligan gangs. And then increasingly, I'm beginning to ask the question, like I did last summer, when you have this Socialist Workers' Party, these stand up to racism, who seem to be able to assemble very quickly with their ballies and their face masks on, with their banners, who's funding them? Where's that coming from? How do we know there's not foreign interference there with people deliberately trying to whip up a fervour on our streets because it suits them if we're destabilised as a nation?
May I just point out that the red-faced, beer-bellied man you were talking to is not a reference to me, I hope.
No, you don't have a beer belly, Peter. You're a nice, svelte gentleman.
Not quite, but this whole kind of issue is about, is there inconsistencies in policing, which then makes people think, is there some kind of conspiracy going on?
Right.
When you have a group of protesters who might be waving Union flags, across the St George's flags and the like, who get kettled by the territorial support group on Westminster Bridge, detained for a couple of hours, many of them handcuffed, and not allowed to move because there is a fear they will cause disruption with the protest that's going on that is completely like non-aligned to them, for example, pro-Palestine, Antifa and the such like. When you get that happening, and then you get identical circumstances that are merely flipped, and those people are walked to that demonstration, some of them masked, some of them muscular, some of them looking like they are not going to be there for peaceful protest. When they get marched to the Bell Hotel at Epping, of course people are going to go, this is inconsistent. There's not one rule throughout here being applied. What is going on? Why do the police allow that mob to go to a demonstration? Why do they detain another group of people? Is it because of their political leanings? Is it because of their liberalism and their wokeness? Is it because they are left of centre themselves and they therefore want to facilitate it? Or is it, as I suspect, they're just blooming hopeless?
Do you know what I don't understand, Blex, is this nation and the Western world seem to spend an inordinate amount of money and energy and concern and political posturing trying to defeat the dark forces of communism in the world, right? In the 60s, in the 70s, in the 80s, we wanted to put weapons in space because of the dark forces of communism. And now, all of a sudden, you have these far-left groups, these Antifa ones, these Socialist Workers' Parties ones, and nobody is going, who are they? Who funds them? You call yourself a party. Where's your leader? Where's your manifesto? Sit there, answer my questions. No one's doing that. We're just like, oh, yeah, mad communists, bring it on. When did this happen? What is going on?
Well, with regards to policing, of course, what happened in 1997 or thereabouts was Tony Blair said education, education, education. And some smart and ambitious police officers thought, we'll have a bit of this. And off they went to university to get their degrees. And they came back with their heads brainwashed with pseudo-intellectual Marxist claptrap. And so the police service we have today is unrecognisable from the policing of my era. And whilst policing will never be perfect because it's full of people, basically, it has fallen a mighty long way, not only from what it was, but from what the public want, expect and deserve. It has been politicised. When you look at the College of Policing that hands down its diktats, its rules, its regulations, its attitudes that need to be slavishly adhered to, and you look at that quango, which is the most pointless quango on the planet, It is little surprise that you have chief constables like Ben Julian Harrington saying this yesterday in response to a question about that policing operation at the Bell Hotel in Epping. Give me one moment as I put my glasses on and read verbatim what he said. I've taken out the ums and the ahs, stumbles, okay, because you could see his brain churning. He said, and I quote, "It is not for me to comment and to try to criticise or indeed to examine that operation." Excuse me?
What?
Not only are you the Chief Constable of Essex Police, you are the national lead for public order issues and policing operations. It is very much your position to criticise, to comment on that operation. It's factually your job. And he ducked it. And this is the kind of policing. This is the pernicious lack of responsibility that has crept into so much of public service, and in particular, policing. This is why we're going to hell in a handcart.
What do you make of the police going, we just aren't ready for a summer of unrest? Oh, we've been stripped back to the bone. We don't have enough officers. If people are protesting outside migrant hotels and we've got to have boots on the ground there, we're not going to be able to do our normal day jobs. And I'm like, what? Your normal day jobs? Like nicking people for using a hurty word?
When Starmer got on his high horse last year, and understandably so, in an effort to quell the riots, and I do not condemn violence and rioting, let me tell you, if you do that, you're an idiot. Starmer, when he said people will face the full force of the law, the police were able to mobilise 6,500 police officers. They can mobilise, if need be. They can deploy in huge numbers, if need be, and I fear that we may be seeing that because this country is an absolute tinderbox with disquiet as manifested by your brilliant callers, and it's what's out there. I'm on the streets every day talking to ordinary people. It's a blooming tinderbox. And in response to that, this lamentable Prime Minister and his deputy yesterday said to Cabinet, improve integration. No. Get a grip on immigration. That's what they need to be doing.
But when they talk about lip service, improve integration, that's great. What do you want to do? Build some youth centres? I mean, we've been listening to this for 2 decades now. Oh, it's not the fault of the people going out causing havoc on the streets. It's because they don't have anywhere to go and learn DJing. It hasn't worked. What we need to do is say, what does integration look like? Oh, it looks like British values, which means let's stick our flag on every public building. Let's take down all the political flags, whether it's trans lives or Gaza. Let's get rid of all the BLM nonsense. Let's say to people, you ain't wearing a burqa because guess what? We can't see your face. That means you're not integrated. Let's enforce the fact that people need to speak English by saying you don't get a translator. Do you know what? In the modern world, you can use your phone if you really need to. Why aren't they? They're not going to come up with a single policy for integration because everything that requires being done in order to create integration is the sort of jingoistic celebrate the nation and discard other cultures that they hate doing. It's the photo negative of what they believe. And their idea of integration is we all need to celebrate Ramadan. It's just madness.
And let's stop boatload after boatload after boatload of sex-starved, involuntary celibate men who we don't know who they are. We don't know where they've come from. We don't know their motives and intentions. Let's stop all those thousands upon thousands of people coming to this country and being parachuted onto our streets where we know a significant number of them are committing sex crimes.
Honestly, Peter, it's the British public can see what's going on. This is why they're furious. And where are the politicians? Where are they? They don't speak to us. They don't address us. They don't like us. Peter Blexley, former Met Police detective, always awesome, always amazing. Oh, well, I despair. Anyway, keep your thoughts coming in, 0344499 1000. Would you be minded to go out and protest? Or are you thinking, no, this is all going to kick off, and I think we've got to have another way to hear our voices heard, but if we keep going out and protesting outside migrant hotels, we're asking for trouble? Or are you saying, no, do you know what, I'm making my placard as we speak. I'm opening out my old cereal box and getting my Sharpie and writing what I want to write on that, and I'll be down there by close of play today. Let me know your thoughts when it comes to protesting. Is it a good idea, or is this just inviting trouble? 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. If you do that, write the word talk before you write your message. Right, it's going to take a short break now, but you'll be pleased to know, if you haven't been delighted by all the things we've been debating already today, that we're going to be discussing the fact that that's right, you, Britain, the government, aka us, the taxpayer, we could be sued over climate change. Make it make sense.
There is absolutely no excuse on this earth for why we are where we are 1 year into more than a year into a new government. This administration had plenty of time to prepare proper solutions to stop the boats. What's happened, in fact, as everybody knows, is that there's been a multiplier. Instead of stopping the boats, even more than ever are coming over. And for the government now to say, oh gosh, things are looking a little bit hairy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Oh, do you know what? Every time I've been saying this over the last few days, because people go, the government should be sued for that. The government should be made to pay. And I'm like, the problem is, whenever we go, the government should be sued, it ain't Sir Keir Starmer's bank account that's emptied out or Rachel Reeves' ISA. No. We are the people who put the money in the Treasury. We are the ones, therefore, when the government needs to be sued, it's you and I. When all these people who have had their transitions done by the NHS decide actually it was a form of child abuse, and there's some big scandal and an inquiry and they all deserve to be paid damages, that's you and I paying that, isn't it? Even though we said from the beginning, don't think kids should be put on puberty blockers. That looks like a really bad, horrific way to go. We'll be the ones having to pay for that decision, won't we? And so it turns out that apparently, and this is absolutely crazy because you and I are also screaming from the rooftops, aren't we? The blimmin' net zero that we are paying for, right, is a disaster. Well, apparently if we don't stick to it, we could potentially be sued for that because the UN has opened the door to Britain being sued over its historic contribution to climate change. Oh, Isambard Kingdom Brunel used a bit too much coal when building those railway lines, didn't he, and those bridges? Terrible. That means you and I have got to stick our hands in our pockets. In a significant legal opinion, the International Court of Justice, the ICJ, otherwise known as the Don't Exist, Leave Us Alone, your stupid tyrannical socialist project, said failure by countries to meet their climate obligations could, in specific cases, allow other states affected by climate change to sue them. Well, if we're going to start suing people over the weather, I think we in Britain have got some skin in that game. It's not like we live in, like, you know, North Mediterranean or something, is it? Let's speak now to Andy Mayer, energy analyst at the Institute of Economic Affairs. What on earth is this utter ridiculous rot? What is it?
So this is a ruling by the International Court of Justice, which is responding to a specific request from the Secretary General of the United Nations to determine whether states should be made liable for reparations for their historic contribution to climate change and any future contribution. For example, if Saudi Arabia commissions a vast new oil or gas field in order to provide the world with the energy that it wants, technically they could be sued under this ruling if they decide to take it seriously, because it's an advisory ruling. So it's extremely worrying because it takes the court in a direction that essentially means that it's deciding over the wishes of democratically elected governments what policy should be on climate change, and if the governments disagree on behalf of their people who may not wish to pay reparations to Pacific islands disappearing under the sea, then tough. They will have their lawyers dispatched to sue us until the governments withdraw from these international agreements.
Answer me this, OK? I'm going to take you down a route that many people do not care to be taken down, but I'm going to do it anyway because, you know, we've got a lawless sort of show today. I watched the other day Martin Durkin's climate change documentary. Now, some elements of that, he calls it the great scam, global warming, something like that. Certain elements, because I looked it up, have had to be corrected. There were certain things that, because it was so legally challenged and attested, there were certain things it's like, right, OK, we're going to have to tweak that, or maybe that claim wasn't as watertight as we thought. But 98% of it was fine, passed muster. And the whole narrative was along the lines of, OK, climate is changing, climate does change, climate has always changed. Let's look at graphs over a significant period of time. In fact, we had a mini freeze in the middle of the last century, in the post-war years, when industry was all ramping up and we'd been bombing the heck out of each other. We actually had a period of a decade or so where the temperatures radically plummeted. And also, and I didn't realise this, you go back in history to the Middle Ages, there were vineyards around London, it was so hot, which is why so many streets in London are called like Villiers Street and Viner Street and things like that, because we were surrounded by vineyards, because we had a Mediterranean climate. And so what I want to know is, if we're going to start suing each other because apparently, you know, Mrs. Miggins putting a log fire on in the winter has caused some atoll in the Pacific to be hit by a tidal wave, I want to have proof, because the legal system is all about proof, and I'm not sure this stuff can be proven.
Yeah, I mean, this fundamentally are areas of social and environmental policy which are all about trade-offs. So you and I are producing greenhouse gases when we breathe out, CO2. The idea that somebody could sue us for breathing is clearly absurd. But that, in effect, is what the ICJ have just ruled. And they're looking at aggregate effects over time, such as the Industrial Revolution, from a very one-sided perspective, which is merely the long-term consequences. But those consequences include, for example, the invention of new industries, the rise of much higher levels of food production, of steel manufacture, and all the things that you actually need in order to deliver alternative forms of energy in the future. So it's crazy. It's saying that everything to do with fossil fuels is bad and evil and must be stopped. And all the positive things that have come from fossil fuels, which have delivered the modern world we live in, don't count. So, you know, reasonably, if you wanted to get lawyers involved with this, you would have to look at both sides of the equation, and you'd very quickly come to the conclusion that all of these places are better off as a result of the things that our ancestors did. And if you want to develop, if you are a poor country with much lower standards of living than us, then the first stage of that at the moment involves fossil fuels. So curtailing the right of countries to develop is another possible consequence. The ruling has targeted countries like China and India, for example. So this is a great day for lawyers. Lawyers can get paid for standing in court making stupid arguments like this, and we, the taxpayer, will end up footing the bill unless our government says, thank you for your advice, We note it, but otherwise we believe these are matters for democratically elected governments to decide for their own people. Thank you.
When it comes to democratically elected governments, ours has decided to handpick lovely Lord Hermer, Marxist in chief, to be our Attorney General. I'd imagine he's salivating at the prospect of bringing about some climate reparation repayments.
Well, I mean, he very probably is quite pleased by this because it's his chambers that have helped deliver this ruling. In fact, the lawyer for the Solomon Islands, Harj Narula, is bragging about it all over The Guardian and LinkedIn this morning. So he is delighted. He's got a lot of work coming, but he thinks he's doing, to be fair to him, he thinks he's doing it because he's saving the world. But this is the politics of teenage climate activists. Yeah. This is not serious.
If you actually say to the industrialised world, who makes most stuff, who has actually put in place democracy and the rule of law, who has been behind all of the progress in society across the world, whether it's developing vaccines or steam engines or the internet, if you say to them, go to hell in a handcart, you're actually going to hurt the entire planet. Can we actually just go, let's get out the ICJ? Because America's not in it, is it? I mean, there's loads of countries who just go, nah, don't want anything to do with that stupid Mickey Mouse court.
Well, that unfortunately could be the long-term consequence, because there are things that international law does that are extremely valuable, trying to bring nations together to make lasting and binding agreements. But this isn't that. And if you care about climate change, if you're on the environmental side of this debate, this should worry you, because it's going to damage two things. One is respect for the rule of international law, and the other is the prosperity required to deliver the innovation and improvements that will deliver those alternative energy systems. So it's lose-lose for absolutely everybody except the lawyers.
Lose-lose for everybody apart from our lovely Lord Hermer. Oh, Andy, thank you ever so much for explaining that to us. 4 more years of this Labour government, 4 more years. I wonder how much money we're going to be stripped of. I wonder how many cities and towns are going to burn. I wonder how many more migrants are going to come in. Can't wait, can you? Anyway, if you can't wait for the next 2 hours, don't you worry, because we're going to take a short break and I'm going to be back with a bang, because I'm going to be joined by Charlie Downs, campaign director of Restore Britain. We're going to be talking more about migrant hotels, what could be done, what should be done, and is protesting the right way to go about things. Right, I'm going to have a little cup of tea and I'll see you just after this.
UK. On DAB+. On your smart speaker. On your smart TV. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back, you lovely discerning patriots. It's great to have your company. We make each other feel a bit better about things, don't we, when we sit there? You don't have to do the ranting, I do it for you. That's right, isn't it? You can sit there and go on, go, get in there. And I would just vent on all of our behalves, because I just can't believe what's going on. Sometimes I have to pinch myself, because I'm going to tell you a little story, right? I went home yesterday and I was pretty knackered, pretty tired. I've been doing a lot of work, haven't I? Been here every day and weekend breakfast as well. And I was starting to fray at the edges because I'm also moving house. And so I walked into what looks like some sort of, I don't know, some building that's been ransacked by squatters because there's boxes and bits everywhere. And I was like, right, I better start doing something. I just couldn't. And I sat on the sofa, moved space so I could watch the telly, which I don't often do. Put the news on. I was like, no, that is really thoroughly depressing. And I was feeling really down. And my mate phoned me up, my mate Nigel, and he's like, how are you doing, Alex? And I was like, I'm all right. And he's like, you don't sound okay. And I said, well, I'm just not really. And I said, it's really funny. Sometimes I feel like I take work home with me. As in, I sit there and every day I'm talking about the news and really getting myself into a froth because I'm having to tackle these issues head on, talk about them, debate them, discuss them, try and find logic or rationale in them. And I just can't anymore. And I said to him, I've been angry at politics in the past. I was angry when they tried to overturn the Brexit deal at the heart of all of that. I thought it was a disgusting betrayal of democracy. I couldn't believe how arrogant our elites were. And I said, but this is worse because I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the country and I'm going, I don't know what can be done. I don't know if we can be saved from this point. I mean, how much worse is it going to get? And it's not just some sort of amorphous idea out there from a storybook, some dystopian novel that Britain's fallen. It's real. But we're not talking about something that isn't happening, inventing stuff. You can see it every day, depending where you live in the country, when you leave your house. And it's desperate. And you feel powerless. And you feel angry and sad and depressed and emotional. And I felt like a broken human yesterday. Anyway, didn't really cheer him up, did I? There you are. Never mind. But, I just said all strength to your elbow, mate. You got a big job on your hands. Let's see how Charlie Downs is feeling. Let's see if he's Downs by name and down by nature. Who's the campaign director for Restore Britain. Charlie, can Britain be restored? That's what I want to know, because like I was saying yesterday, I sat on my sofa and I was just like, this is just abysmal.
Well, there must be something in the air yesterday, Alex, because I was in Swindon and I was walking around.
Well, that would get you sad, wouldn't it?
Well, there was this... The only way I can describe it is there was this uneasy silence hanging over the town. And that's the case in a lot of our towns and cities now. There is a tension in the air. And I think a lot of people are increasingly feeling like it's all about to kick off, quite frankly. And I don't think that people are wrong to feel that way, because this country is being so poorly governed. It's actually mind-blowing. And it is incredibly depressing to watch, because I think, sure, the condition of the country now is bad, but think about what it's going to be like in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, by the end of the century. And that's when my children are going to be alive, are going to be growing up, and my grandchildren and so on. And I think about what this country is going to look like at that time, and it fills me with dread. But with that being said, to your question, can we restore Britain? Yes, I think we can. I'm a very optimistic person. I think despite the dire condition of our country, I do think that change is possible. I do think a different direction, a different future is possible. But what it requires is organisation. It requires that ordinary people actually stand up and make their voice heard to the government. And it's interesting that we're seeing these, peaceful, well-disciplined protests now happening outside of these asylum hotels, which are actually forcing the government to change. Like in Epping, for example, peaceful protest led the asylum hotel to be closed and to the migrants to be moved. And so it shows you that the only language that our government actually listens to, it's not the ballot box, it's actually ordinary people going out and forcing the government to actually listen to them.
But moving asylum seekers out of that hotel in Epping Forest might be a win for Epping Forest, but they're not being moved home. They're not being moved into mass immigration detention centres. Worse, actually, is they're probably going to be put in private housing. And somebody sent me a list the other day from one of these associations in charge of snatching up private accommodation for HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy. And they've got a traffic light system, and some places are red, i.e. we don't want houses in this town, in this city. So if you've got private accommodation and you want to offer it to us and you live there, don't bother. And I noticed Gloucester was on that list, for example, because I'm from Gloucester. And I'm like, probably because Gloucester already is one of the biggest multicultural hotspots in the southwest that you can imagine. And when I was looking through that list, I saw all sorts of places. You know, the New Forest. Yeah, let's move more to the New Forest. I'm like, don't go. Not the New Forest. Can we not have anything sacred? But I also noticed on the list, green light, we're looking for private accommodation, was Epping Forest, for crying out loud. So they might have shut that Bell Hotel, but soon those protesters might be waking up to find that the house next door has now got 6 Syrian men living in it. And that, to me, is even worse.
Well, it's so frustrating because all of this is it's like it's second and third order consequences of a far more fundamental issue, which is, why are these people even coming here in the first place? Why are they being put up in these, very swanky accommodations? And it's because of this malign legislation, and beneath that, this doctrine of human rights, which really took our country, took the West over completely in the aftermath of the Second World War. And at that time, of course, these ideas were relevant and they were necessary, but now they're completely unfit for purpose because, in the name of human rights, we're putting up rapists and criminals and people who are genuine threats to the local community, young men primarily, and that's somehow supposed to be a virtue, it's somehow supposed to be a good thing. But it just doesn't work. It's things like the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999, which forces us to provide housing, clothing, and money to these people. And so it's no surprise that you have record numbers coming over now. And by the way, they're from countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh and Vietnam and India and all the rest of it. Like, these are not war-torn countries, and these are not people who are fleeing persecution. These are people who are coming here because we're giving them free stuff. Like, it really is that simple. And Macron was right when he said that we need to eliminate those pull factors if we want to meaningfully deal with this issue. Now, if it were up to me, I wouldn't be using hotels at all. At Restore Britain, we have said that we should be using tents, we should be using MOD land and putting up these temporary tented accommodation to keep these people in with minimal clothing and sanitation, enough that it meets humanitarian standards, but not so much that it's a pull factor, actually so much that these people look at the conditions that they'll be living in and they say, actually, I'm not interested in coming.
Well, that's it. If you're coming from some sort of flea-bitten place where a bomb's about to fall on your noggin, you'd be happy for a tent. In fact, when we had Jewish refugees from continental Europe, we basically put them in camps on army bases, and very grateful they were too, because it was a matter of life and death. Tell me about the Immigration Act 1999. Is this what separates us from our peers over in the European continent? Because, as I keep saying, you look at where the migrants are living in Calais and they've had to make bivouacs out of bin bags. They're not in hotels. You look at where they're accommodated in Greece and you've got these sort of big community centres, concrete floors, and if you're lucky, you might get a mat to lie on. If not, you're having to bunch up your T-shirt and stick it under your head. So why is it in Britain that all of a sudden we have to do the hotel thing, which is absolutely crazy? Is it just us?
Well, you'll notice that so many of the laws that are causing so many problems in our country right now were all passed after 1997. These were all laws that were passed during the reign of New Labour under Tony Blair and then later Gordon Brown, and in fact the Cameronite sort of, New Labour Conservative Party that came after them. Now, the Immigration and Asylum Act 1999 is one of these laws that has, it's part of a web, a network, a very complicated mess of laws that come downstream from the Human Rights Act 1998, which again really lies at the root of so much of this. It enshrines the ECHR in law in our country. And it's in the Immigration and Asylum Act that these provisions for accommodation, clothing, money, etc. are made. And sure, it sounds nice on paper, the idea that we would have genuine refugees coming from genuinely war-torn places, perhaps near our own country, not, half a world away, like in the Middle East, for example. The idea that we would put them up in good quality accommodation and give them clothing and money and all that sort of thing, it makes sense in the abstract. But when you realize that anybody can come here and abuse this system, and they do, and that's now really all that happens, because we have barely any legitimate refugees actually coming. These are all just chancers who are coming here for the free stuff we're giving them. You realize that it was actually very poorly thought out. and it was certainly no longer fit for purpose and needs to be repealed.
So actually, a great place to begin would be to just get rid of that blimmin' act.
Well, I mean, as with so many of the laws that were passed since 1997, I mean, they all need to go. I mean, the Human Rights Act needs to go. The Immigration and Asylum Act 1999 needs to go. There are various others that are, it's paralysing our government, and it's making it impossible for our government to actually solve this problem. Now, I don't think that our government necessarily even wants to solve the problem, because it's currently occupied by people who share the philosophy that informed those laws in the first place. They are human rightsists, if you want. Keir Starmer himself, of course, is a human rights lawyer. Lord Hermer, very much the same. These are people who believe in this project. They believe that they're doing the right thing. I really do believe that. And so I don't think they have any interest in meaningfully dealing with this problem, which is why we need a truly patriotic government, one that knows what time it is, one that understands the concerns of ordinary people, like those in Epping, who are scared for the safety of their children, of their sisters, of their wives, and all the rest of it, and who recognise that all of this is just not fit for purpose. It needs to go, and new laws need to be brought in to prevent this from ever happening again. Because this is the point. It's not enough to just end it now. We have to make sure that this kind of crisis that we've been facing since at least 2015 with the illegal migration can never happen again. Because sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, talking about that and talking about things never happening again, and my eyes keep averting up here because I'm looking at screens where Sir Keir Starmer is holding a press conference with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. I love a bit of Modi, ain't going to lie, I think he's a hardliner. Surprises me that Keir Starmer wants to stand next to him, considering he was probably calling him the devil about 10 years ago. There's Keir Starmer with his trusty auto cue. He doesn't even try and hide it now. That's all he's staring at. Starmer's just like eyeballing that little machine there, because Lord knows the robot wouldn't know what to say if it wasn't there and being written by somebody else behind the scenes. But look, I love Modi. I love India. I used to live in India. It's a brilliant place. It's got a lot of social issues, but it's a brilliant place. And Modi would be the first one out of the box saying to Starmer, mate, you want to know how to deal with Islamism? Take a leaf out of my book, sunshine, because you don't want it setting up in your country. But the problem is with this, and I'm very happy that in the post-Brexit world, we're getting things like a free trade deal with India, which is incredible. We've got a brilliant relationship with that nation. I just wonder if Mr. Modi there is saying, right, we want further visa relaxation rules. Because now if you go around London and you look at the hospitality sector, once upon a time you went down your local pub or your coffee shop, and everybody was Polish or Lithuanian or Slovakian or Czech. Now,
or English, Alex, imagine that.
No, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm going to say. Now, all the local pubs in my area, the bar staff are all Indian. And I love the Indians a lot, but they don't really know how to pull a pint, if I'm honest with you. It's not really part of their culture. But this is the thing. I love Indians. It's not about Indians themselves, but we don't need a whole new slate of people coming from the developing world into this country where we have so much worklessness, particularly among the 18 to 25 demographic. Do you think he's learnt his lessons, or do you think this particular conversation is going to come with, guess what, even more open borders?
Well, this is the interesting thing about Brexit, Alex, is that after Brexit, and particularly during the reign of Boris Johnson, that traitor, he opened the doors to non-EU countries. And then something like 90% of the immigration that took place during the Boris wave, when millions and millions of people came to our country in literally a couple of years, it was primarily from India, Nigeria, China, and other areas, other regions of the world that really don't share a lot with our own in terms of values and in terms of culture, really. And so what that's meant is that we are now living in a very diverse society. But when I hear diversity, I hear division. Now I hear chaos, because that's what it's creating. That's what this project of multiculturalism is creating. And I think that, like India, for example, there are 1.5 billion Indians in the world. There are a huge number of them. And there's something like 50 million English people. And it's kind of like, why are we bringing this, what are actually a global majority, into our country where we are a global minority? It just doesn't make sense. And it's actually quite... honestly, I think it's pretty evil. The whole project of mass immigration.
Right. I call it cultural vandalism. You could call it demographic vandalism as well, couldn't you? I mean, by and large, what I would say about a lot of Indian immigrants is they have given great things to this nation. You've got brilliant GPs, grocery store owners, lawyers, solicitors. I mean, by and large, most immigration we've had from India has been absolutely sensational.
I don't know about that though, Alex. Because I think it was 2024. We had 250,000 50,000 people come here from India.
Okay,
and are we to believe that they were all locked as
okay, no,
doctors
so yeah,
and
this is what I was going to say. Historically, that has been the case. But like I've said, as much as I like the lovely Indian girl who pulls pints in my local pub, the other day when I asked her for something very simple, she had no idea what it was. You know, just trying to squeak a gin and tonic out of her was like trying to sort of, you know, solve the riddle of the Sphinx. And so this is the point. Why, you know, and it started under Boris Johnson, like you said. It's one thing when we say, because I'm a big believer in the Commonwealth, and I actually am a big believer in those countries that share our democratic systems and our languages that we once colonised. We're able to integrate more than many other nations. The big problem I've got is when we're getting all these characters from North Africa and the Middle East. I'm like, not so much, thank you very much. But if we're not putting a limit on, we want you if you are university educated, but saying, oh, we just want you, whoever you may be, that's when you start walking into problems, because immigration should be discriminatory. We should discriminate the good, the skilled, from those who, frankly, are economic opportunists. And I feel sorry for them, I do. But, you know, it's not our job to invite the whole developing world in here because they can earn more money per hour.
Well, this is the thing, Alex. There's some research from the Centre for Migration Control that showed that in 2023, 80% of those people who came over legally on skilled worker visas, so these are the kinds of people, presumably, that you're talking about, 80% of them weren't earning enough to break even. So there's a £50,000, this was in 2023, a £50,000 a year threshold to essentially put more into the system than you're taking out in the form of, you know, healthcare and housing and benefits and all the rest of it. And 80% of those coming over who are skilled workers weren't reaching that threshold. So it shows you just the level to which our immigration system has been degraded and just simply doesn't function. Because, you know, the idea that we're going to bring over people who are skilled, but who are actually going to be a burden on the taxpayer in the long run, is just absurd. And this is the point, Alex, I think this is the crucial point. Is the entire sort of philosophy of immigration that we have had since the end of the Second World War, I think hasn't worked. Because we talk about mass immigration since Boris Johnson, and then, you know, further back, we talk about it from Tony Blair. But actually, since 1948, at least, we've had, you know, at that time, it was about 30, 40, 50,000 a year. And even then, I would say that's too much, because Enoch Powell, of course, at the time was pointing out the fact that, look, these people are, they're reproducing at a higher rate than we are, which means that the immigrant descended population is going to continue to grow whilst our own continues to shrink. And that's not good for social cohesion. It's very simple. And that's not a controversial or racist thing to say. It's simply a recognition of the reality that people of different groups, there's tension. There's
like I keep saying, humans are tribal animals. It's biologically hardwired into us as a species to want to form collectives of our own and be quite sceptical and dubious about those from other tribes, particularly when there is competition for resources. You're never going to be able to take the human out of a human being. Charlie, it's always such a privilege and a pleasure talking to you. You're so bright. You're so bright. You're like a Wikipedia of wonder. Right, we're going to be taking a short break now, but after that, let's have a chit-chat with some of you, shall we? 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. It's your normal network rate. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. You can write the word talk before you send your text message, and that way it finds its little self in these screens in front of me. Okay, don't go anywhere. I'm back after this.
There is absolutely no excuse on this earth for why we are where we are 1 year into more than a year into a new government. This administration had plenty of time to prepare proper solutions to stop the boats. What's happened, in fact, as everybody knows, is that there's been a multiplier. Instead of stopping the boats, even more than ever are coming over. And for the government now to say, oh gosh, things are looking a little bit hairy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show, and let's hit up the phone line, shall we, and speak straight away to Cliff, because Cliff is in Slovakia. That's fun. Hi, Cliff.
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm all right. How are you? How's Slovakia?
It's wonderful.
High trust society, controlled borders. Oh, the dream.
Yeah, exactly. Just one of the few things that's nice about it.
Anyway, it's great to hear that you're in Slovakia, living your life very well. What can I do you for today?
Well, I was listening earlier to Chris, the ex-police officer who called in, and it's always good to listen to Peter, who I believe is sort of my ilk in terms of my policing experience. Now, my policing experience, 27 years, and a lot of that was in public order policing. So what happened in Essex goes against almost every grain of what you do as a public order officer or tactical advisor or commander.
Oh, so tell us more. What do you think has gone on in Essex? What should have been done? What looked wonky about their particular protocol?
Well, the first thing that looks wonky, and Peter touched on it, you don't combine opposing groups. That's the last thing you do.
Right. And so when these people were met at the train station and sort of escorted right into the heart of the protest, what did the police think was going to happen? That they were going to, like, hold hands and make friends?
Yeah, a bit of come by our singing and, throwing flowers to one another. But initially, there's a lot of talk, and I've seen one or two of the videos of the people wearing face coverings. Section 60, straight away, that legislation is there. We've almost got too much legislation as police service in the UK, and it becomes confusing. But the basics of public order policing were just, it seems irrelevant to that chief. And again, listening to his interview once or twice, I don't think he's got a leg to stand on, to be honest.
Now, my concern is this, Cliff. I don't think this was an isolated event in Essex, because I've seen other videos that purportedly have been taken of similar operational tactics being deployed in other parts of the country. Now, as I didn't take those videos myself, I cannot vouch for when someone says this is police in Hampshire and these are anti-migrant protesters in Aldershot, because I'm not there holding the camera. I've just seen it online. I can't actually verify whether that is the case. But we certainly saw similar things happening in the post-Southport protests, which then quickly bubbled into riots. And so I started to ask the question, is something happening at the best of some sort of higher operational instruction to do things like this deliberately? Or is this just a police force who have been so wokeified, which is more Blexler's theory, that they're just sort of sleepwalking zombie-like into making catastrophic mistakes?
Well, Peter has sort of touched on that frequently, and he's absolutely right. Now, I spent some time working at the College of Policing, and the wokery is beyond the pale. And what happens now, in my day and in Peter's day and probably in Chris's day, officers came up through the ranks and they experienced certain elements of policing and would have been exposed to the sort of public order and disorder situations where they can grow a pair of kahunas, if you like, and not become subject to all this lovey-dovey, go and hold hands, and just be much more operationally savvy in terms of dividing and maintaining order within the law and still permitting peaceful protest.
Right, so you think this is just, you're more on the Peter line, that this is just the police acting like utter bozos rather than there being some sort of let's deliberately stoke things up to shut it down?
Well, I think there's a combination of both. You've got a hierarchy now within the police service, which will do everything they can to pandy to and to accommodate anyone who comes up and asks to protest in whatever vein. And we see illegal face coverings, we see the ISIS flag, and we see all sorts of things at protests now. And in my day, that just didn't happen. And I'm not talking like ancient Roman times. I'm talking 12 years ago. And we policed hard, but we policed fairly. And most people will respect that.
Yeah.
You're always going to get a small minority that think they can kick off and cause disruption, and then it's down to the police to apply the correct tactics to that. And I don't like the term kettling. That kettling means you would stop and contain a group, and that's very difficult to do, particularly with reduced resources. But you can box a group, and you can move them around, and you can detain them temporarily, and you can also, you start nicking one or two with the face coverings, they start coming off.
Yeah. No, do you know what? It's really interesting speaking to retired coppers about this and getting some insight, because it's not a world I know anything about. All I can do as a citizen is sit there, look at things I'm seeing posted online and the reports people are giving me and go, what on earth is going on? And so it's really great having people who may be able to answer those questions, shedding a bit of light. Cliff, thank you ever so much. Enjoy lovely Slovakia. Let's speak now to Jack, who's a bit closer to home because he's here in our capital city of London. Good morning, Jack.
Good morning. I wanted to say that the police are there not to facilitate protest, but to facilitate law and order. And if there's a breakdown in law and order, their job is to sort it, whoever it is, whether it's far right, far left or whatever. What they allowed in Essex was a group of local concerned people to become targeted by the far left. And when we're talking about managing crowds, this crowd was like 20, 30, 40, 50. There weren't a lot of them. And there was more than enough police resources to deal with that. I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's a political conspiracy. I think what you've got here is fear of people in authority that don't know how to act, like a rabbit caught in the headlights. Whether that's the police in charge of the Rotherham grooming gangs investigations who did nothing, whether that's the police in charge of the protests outside the Bell Hotel who acted in the wrong way because they didn't know what to do. They're all scared, and what they're scared of is losing their job. They're not scared of doing the right thing. And we need someone who is not scared to do the right thing. And one of the things you got with Margaret Thatcher is she stuck to her guns. And if she was right, she said, nope, I'm pushing on. I'm going through with this. This is what's happening. Because at the time, she was dealing with football hooliganism back in the 80s. And whether you like her or whether you don't, she dealt with that. She had a targeted view to how she was going to deal with it, and she dealt with it extremely well. She's dealt with the miners. She dealt with all of these things. But in this day and age, I think, as everybody says, you've got these ideological-driven people who are now in positions of authority that are saturating us with wokeness, that now the people that are working under them are too scared to speak.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Like-minded people.
When you think, because I've said this all the time, that when people get to the top of their professions, particularly if it's in a civic-minded profession, a public service profession, but actually in the big corporates as well, it's been rammed into them, all of this critical race theory, all of this diversity training, all of this tug your forelock and, take a knee and wear a rainbow lanyard. They've been bashed over the head with it, and they've had to be obsequious to it, otherwise they wouldn't have been able to progress up the ranks. So by the time they're the person in charge, they're so blimmin' brainwashed, they believe all of the gaslighting nonsense that they have been force-fed throughout the course of their career. And so when they then have to make big decisions of, do we go after the rape gang, it's like, oh, I don't know, that might be racist. They can't see the wood from the trees anymore. Whereas very often the working class, those who don't live a sheltered, protected existence, and those who aren't bombarded with all of this critical race theory nonsense, social justice warrior rubbish. Those people can see reality because it's the streets where they live that you have the migrant hotels. It's the streets where they live that have the dirty mattresses and the vape shops and the dodgy Turkish barbers. They're the ones having to face down the reality that has been completely flushed out of the brains of the people who are deciding what goes on in this country. Jack, very well done. Thank you for bringing that back to my mind. You made an extremely vital point. If you've got a vital point that you want to make, 03444991000 is the number to call. Register your interest, please, with the lovely Alicia, who will take down your name and number and will give you a call back. You can use that number as well to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. You've got to write the word talk if you're going to send me an SMS. Now, I've got one more little appeal for you because I asked, didn't I, in the first hour, do any of you know about operational duties when it comes to the police and protocol of managing protests? Turns out some of you did, and you called me up, which is great. We want to get information. We want to share facts and truth as well as opinions and be somewhere where you can congregate to come and hear and learn about reality. So I'm going to put out another appeal. Who on earth are the Socialist Workers' Party? Who are they? Who's their leader? Where's their manifesto? Where's their money coming from? Because all these ne'er-do-wells who turn them in their ballies and their placards seem to always have some connection to that entity. I want to know how sinister they are. Is there some dodgy infiltration from countries who mean us harm? Because they're not accountable. Oh, you see their placards at every protest, whether it's pro-Pally, Just Stop Oil, migrants, racists, all that, you know, they're everywhere. They are ubiquitous. They're like some sort of massive industrial complex of anti-patriotic campaigning. So I think it's about time they were held to account. Have you ever been part of their lot? Ever been out on a process? Do you know how they organise? Do you know how they operate? Can you do some digging for me? Go on then, thought you might. Right, going to take a short break, but don't go anywhere. When I come back, we're catching up with Big Phil, the one and only Philip Ingram, former senior military intelligence officer, on quite the state of our armed forces.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, as promised, and without further ado, but with a lot of fanfare, we're joined by Big Phil, Philip Ingram, MBE, former senior military intelligence officer. It's been a while since you and I had a catch-up, isn't it?
It has. It's been far too long, and we need to do it somewhere else with a glass of cider.
That's my language. Very good proposition there. I'll be saying yes. Let's talk now about the state of the Royal Navy, because we've learned today that the Navy now has no attack submarines at sea at all, which are used to defend all the boats and all the operational activity that goes on above ground. Where have they all gone?
Well, they're all stuck in port. You know, 2 of them have been under refit for at least 2 years. There's only 5 of them in total. And the final one that was at sea, HMS Anson, for some reason or other, has gone back to port and isn't schnorgeling underneath HMS Prince of Wales down in Southeast Asia. It seems that the Americans have taken over that role.
I mean, how vital is this? I don't necessarily understand how the Navy operates. What I do understand, though, is when it comes to protecting the high seas, this seems to be of utmost importance. And I'm not just talking about dinghies coming across the channel, which I'm sure attack submarines aren't necessarily focusing on, but Houthi rebels attacking cargo ships, the Chinese creating random fake news atolls in the middle of the Pacific. So they can turn around and go, this is now Chinese territorial water. The Russian shadow fleet transporting loads and loads of illegal fossil fuels around the world, filling Putin's coffers. I mean, you would think if anything needed to be ship-shape, mind the pun, it's actually the Royal Navy.
Oh, definitely. You know, the surface fleet is okay-ish. You know, they've got 2 aircraft carriers, both are working. HMS Prince of Wales is having a fantastic trip down into Southeast Asia and is doing a lot of good. But there should be a package of ships that support it, and part of that package is a submarine that protects from underneath. And our submarines, we've got effectively 2 types in the UK. We've got our nuclear deterrent submarines, where there's always one of them at sea. They're so old they're creaking, but we're managing to keep one at sea the whole time. They remain hidden. They don't do anything else but just wait for that potential order to fire their nuclear missiles. The others are the nuclear attack submarines, and they protect our seas, they protect our carrier group, and our naval forces are going around, but they also do lots of schnorgeling. Going and listening in.
You said schnorgeling twice now, and my ears pricked up the first time you said it, because I'm like, that's a good word. What does schnorgeling mean?
In intelligence gathering. So they will sneak into places that people don't want them to sneak into, and find ways of sniffing what's happening in the atmosphere, and find out what's going on. So you talked about the Chinese threats that there are in Southeast Asia. They're very real. Been able to listen in covertly to Houthi communications if that is needed. There's other ways of doing it, but submarines are good at that. Monitoring the Russian activity. There's a massive series of Russian exercises that are happening with over 150 ships going to sea over the next few weeks from 4 of their 5 fleets. Their 5th fleet is the Black Sea Fleet, which the Ukrainians have managed to decimate.
So maybe we have learned about that particular military operation through a bit of a schnurgle on the side. I love that word, Phil. That's it.
It's a good word. I love it too. It's a good intelligence gathering word.
Oh, love military jargon. Like, I just learnt the other day that Chinooks are called waka wakas. I think that's so cute. Waka waka. Now, I want to talk about this as well, because if it's not only the fact that our submarines aren't at liberty to schnurgle because they're all back at base having sticking plasters put on them, we now learn that some of our weapons that our troops are using could give them brain damage.
Yeah. Well, that's not surprising. It's nothing new. Whenever you fire, especially the large caliber weapons, these things are not firing Nerf pellets or anything else. They have a big woomph of an explosion. There's another good word, woomph, whenever they fire, and they have another equally big woomph whenever they explode at the other end. But our troops tend to be at the firing end. And it's the blast wave that comes from that. They're suddenly realizing actually causes damage to our troops, not the sort of damage that can be protected with the air defenders that are given, but it causes more blast damage that goes through the brain and is causing brain damage.
So we're basically talking about when you fire off one of these huge ballistics and you're on the other side, you can have whatever earpiece in that you fancy, but your brain's probably going to be rattling around inside your skull like a ping pong machine.
Oh, very much so. And it's not just the really big things. I remember firing rifles and your head's ringing and rattling, and you spend a day on the range and you've got a good headache at the end of it because you've had a good thump. Up that to mortars and then artillery pieces, and then some of the bigger rockets. Then the amount of vibrating your head is magnified each time.
Wow, I can't imagine what listening to me for 3 hours every day does to people. That's probably a recipe for brain damage.
No comment.
But seriously, what can be done about this? Because I adore our men and women in the armed forces. I just think it's one of the most noble things you can do with your life as a profession to serve your country and put yourself in harm's way. So I don't want to detract from that. But I don't see how you can get around firing a gun might rattle your head around.
You can't. You can fix some of these things with the design of more modern weapons, but the important thing is to try and identify if there is actual damage being done that way. You have to remember that most people in the military will go out and play sports and do other things where they're banging their heads together or they're boxing, and that causes brain damage. So it's getting the research to understand what's happening, exactly why it's happening, and then translate that into the innovations that you can put into weapon design, but also then protective equipment for our soldiers to wear, so that it will make it safer in the future. Soldiers, ever since they've invented something that's gone bang, have suffered from these sorts of injuries.
Yeah, as you know, Phil, my other half has property in Wiltshire, not too far away from Salisbury Plain, and so sometimes when I'm staying there at night, I hear the booms echoing through the night sky. It gets me rather excited, to be honest. I quite like it. Sometimes I sort of go like a little weirdo, walking closer so I can listen to the bangs even more clearly. But when you realise, you get an idea of how loud these things are. I've just come back from Fairford Air Show, and B-1 bomber makes all the car alarms set off because it's that heavy a piece of equipment. Yep. But can you give me a little bit of a positive? I don't know if you can, but I just have this hope somewhere inside that somewhere like Porton Down, there's some very clever wonks, some boffins in a laboratory cooking up some sort of mad supersonic lasers that are going to be the future of warfare, so we can get an upper hand over our adversaries without giving our troops brain damage.
Well, Porton Down is part of the Defence Scientific and Technical Laboratories, and if you ever wanted the weirdest of laboratories filled with conehead-type professors, they exist there, and they're not only inventing all of these fascinating lasers. I studied lasers at university, and they're supposed to be a coherent light source at a particular frequency. So theoretically, it's impossible to, or whenever I did my degree, it was impossible to have white lasers. In DSTL, they showed me white lasers, which blew my mind completely. So they're developing these sorts of weird and wonderful weapon systems, and believe me, they are on the invention benches today. They're also developing lots of ways of protecting our troops from cold and blast and everything else. So that work is ongoing, and the UK is probably leading the world in lots of these inventions.
That's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to learn. You make me feel so happy when you tell me things like that. I would give my right arm to go to Porton Down and have a sniff around. That would be like Alex's ideal day. Phil, thank you ever so much for coming on and talking to me about these subjects. Let's just hope in the future we put a little bit more money into defence and a little less money in bringing our adversaries over and shacking them up in 4-star hotels. That would be a good idea, wouldn't it? Right now, after the break, we're going to be talking about the fact that the Tory membership just keeps going down. Apparently, they've lost 8,000 members since Badenoch became leader. Where are they all going? They're going to reform. Can the Conservatives rectify themselves? Let's be speaking after the break with Annunciata Rees-Mogg, Jacob's little sis, who is Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism. That's coming up after this.
There is absolutely no excuse on this earth for why we are where we are 1 year into more than a year into a new government. This administration had plenty of time to prepare proper solutions to stop the boats. What's happened, in fact, as everybody knows, is that there's been a multiplier. Instead of stopping the boats, even more than ever are coming over. And for the government now to say, oh gosh, you know, things are looking a little bit hairy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, what is going on in the Conservative Party? I mean, this is one of the biggest, most successful political institutions this country has ever created, if not the most successful political party this country has ever created. And so you kind of thought they were just fixed as part of the furniture. They're always going to be on the scene. The government's either going to be the Labour Party or the Conservative Party, or before that, it was the Tories or the Whigs. They were always there. Well, they're really not anymore, are they? I mean, in some elections, they're slipping down to 4th place. Their membership has absolutely imploded. They've lost 8,000 ever since the leadership election, which installed Kemi Badenoch as the leader of the party. Can it all be salvaged, or is it just one of those moments in history where, well, things change and change fundamentally and forever? Let's speak now to Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism and, of course, a former MEP. At one point, a Brexit Party MEP sitting with me and my cohort, and then she snuck off back to the Tories. Naughty girl. Naughty Annunziata. But what is going on? You've seen it from both sides. You know most of the Reform lot because they have emanated, many of them, from the Brexit Party, and you also know a lot of the Tory lot. What is going on? Is this just a case of the Conservatives gradually being replaced by Reform UK, or is there something otherwise fundamentally wrong inside the Conservative Party right now?
I think the real problem with the Conservatives is they've totally lost their way, that their own membership don't really know what they stand for. The voting public haven't a clue, really. And we get these mixed messages between reshuffles and policy announcements that don't seem to match up. And until they do, how can anyone have faith? But what I think could happen and could turn it around is if there's a very, very strong values-led, principles-led policy platform. And if Kemi has got the guts to come out and keep saying things such as reducing the size of the state and the tax burden on normal taxpayers, like Milei has in Argentina, then there is hope, but it might be the most successful political party in the history of the world, not just the UK, but it doesn't owe anyone, no one owes it blind loyalty. And they've got to prove they're worthy of support. And at the moment, I don't think it's clear enough for most people to do so. I am staying with them. I still think they're the best way of achieving really substantive change, that we all know this country is falling to pieces, and we're, I think, on the whole, all very, very worried.
We are, indeed.
And it's got to turn around. And I think at the moment they are the best people, best placed to do that, but not unless they know what they're doing, how they're doing it, and crucially, why. So
this is the difficulty, I think, that faces the Conservative Party. The difficulty now slightly being faced by Reform, because people on the right wing of politics are saying Reform's gone too soft. Oh, you become centrist, you're now an establishment party, because under our voting system, you have to build cohorts of votes. And certainly the Conservative Party, who were at one stage the broad church, seem to have become the broad church without any, any holy book, if you will. And on one side, they've got to cover off hemorrhaging support to the Liberal Democrats in the Shires mainly, where Ed Davey seems to have managed to scoop up a lot of votes just by, I don't know, bimbling about on a jet ski like the absolute numbskull that he is. But on the other hand, they've got to sort of appeal to some of their voters who are looking at Nigel Farage and saying, that's more the sort of politics I want to see happen in this country. And that age-old tug of war that has taken place for a long time now between the two competing factions of the Conservative Party is potentially going to be the thing that hurts them again, because they've got to decide which way to pivot.
And that is what happened in the 1970s when we also had a completely disastrous Labour government that ruined the country financially but also socially. And you had on the one side the Heathites, who were the Wets, as we began to call them, and they still are within the party. And then you had Thatcher, and Thatcher was prepared to make the lead that you don't gain followers by following them. You gain followers by taking a stance that people can believe in. And that's what we need now. Kemi has been in position for 8 months. She has said she won't have any full policy announcements until later in this parliament. I think we can expect a report on the ECHR and whether we should leave it in October. This has got to be speeded up. Not necessarily the detail, because that matters less until there is an election and you can say exactly how you will do things. But the principles that Kemi said, for example, which I fully support, we should not have a target of 2050 for net zero. But she's got to say, does she believe in net zero at all? Or should it be 2051? That you've got to be bold and you've got to take people with you. And I think there's still an opportunity to do that, but it's an ever-diminishing window.
Are the right people, the right power brokers behind the scenes, the people who are going to deliver that? Because, you know, I've never really been in the Conservative Party. I think I had a fleeting moment of membership for all about 2 months because I had a moment of madness. But I know a lot of people who have been in the Conservative Party and been in the Conservative Party a long time and kind of get these things and understand the factions and the power brokers. And someone said to me the other day, well, that's it with Kemi's reshuffle. This is the Gove takeover, fully throated and achieved. And that actually, when you look behind the scenes at some of the staffers and the people who might be writing the policy and determining the direction of travel, they're kind of more from the side of the Conservative Party who, you know, a little bit cuddly, a little bit fuzzy, a little bit Lib Dem. I mean, I don't know if you can shed some light on that. Like I said, I don't know how it works.
I think yes and no. I don't think it was a clear directional reshuffle, and I would have personally wanted a much stronger showing for the proper Tories within the party. But there were some very good moves in there as well. That Neil O'Brien to head up policy at shadow cabinet level, I think is incredibly encouraging, because he is not only very sound on what needs to be done, he's incredibly able at how it can be done. And he's been part of Conservative thinking, well, since we were both in our early 20s, and we're not anymore. But he's got a very good mind, and I think he will grip that very well and sensibly. But the leader needs to lead with a vision. And at the moment, I don't know that we've got that. I think Kemi knows what she stands for, but she hasn't articulated it to the rest of the country. We need to see more of her, and we need to know why she's doing what she's doing.
Is there an argument to say that, you know, it's all a bit too late now? That some people say better late than never, but actually, you know, it's a bit like when you walk past a shop. You look at the window. If you like the wares they're selling, you go through the door. If you don't, the likelihood is you're not going to bother thinking, oh, I'm going to go down that street because I like that shop. You're going to be going to the big shiny one up there that's got the half-price sale and the bog-off offers. And that Kemi has sort of like blown her chance because, you know, she needed to come out of the box strong and she didn't. And so she's kind of made her bed.
Well, I think the Conservative Party is pretty well known for not being unwilling to defenestrate its leaders. And I don't think that a challenge is at all impossible.
Oh, so you think she should be...
I think she could prove her value and her leadership skills by setting out her wares, by selling why we need to bring back control away from international courts and to our British democratic system, how we can bring the judges that seem to make these appalling decisions back under control, how we can get the police to police and do take the actions that matter to all of us so that we're safe in our houses and on the streets. If she can do that, if there are people who won't come with her on issues such as net zero, such as the ECHR, potentially, and I would hope, such as tax cuts to encourage growth, then I think she has to be prepared to expel any wets
But
that
the
there
problem
are
is,
still
though,
there.
does
And
Kemi
if she
have
did
those
that, I think she would be able to show, because in opposition you can't change things, and Reform know this, that you can't actually change what happens in Parliament or how laws are enacted. But what you can do is show that you have the ability and the will to make things change.
I mean, the thing is this as well, though. Kemi just actually actively boasted about not having wares. When they were asked, what was your position on this? Would you leave the ECHR? What do you think about this? She sort of said, I've only just come into power. I want to find my feet. I want to settle down. I want to make up my mind. I'm going to come up with policy as and when. And so you kind of got the feeling that there isn't any real conviction there. And so now she turns around and goes, guess what? These are my wares. No to net zero, no to the ECHR. It's like, well, those are Reform's wares, and they've said that from the outset. It doesn't...
I don't think that's... I mean, yes, she did certainly say she was going to take her time, formulate detailed policy, blah, blah, blah. And personally, I think that was an error, that she should have set out her values first. But she hasn't been shy about her values at any point. We have all heard so many times, if you have an interest in politics, otherwise you won't have done, but that her fight on women's rights, trans rights, on being a black woman, and that making no difference to her politics, but empowering her to fight more strongly for the politics of this country. That growing up in Nigeria, she saw what socialism did and how absolutely appalling it was for their country. And I don't think any of those principles have ever really been in question. Unfortunately, how she's enacted them has been, and she hasn't kept repeating them. And we all need to keep being reminded of what people stand for.
Yeah, I mean, she's sort of left the playing field. I haven't seen her knocking about for a while. What's she up to?
Well, she's had an absolutely brilliant interview today with one of the broadsheets, where she does say that economically she would be looking to Millet and his famous chainsaws to cut the waste in the state, but also to cut the state's role, which is the crucial part of that you can tinker at the edges and get rid of the odd DEI officer. But what you actually need to do is change the role of the state. And I think it's very interesting that she's looking at that, and very encouraging.
I mean,
and would mean that our taxes could come to a level at which we can all, in fact, afford them and afford to still live. She is very much making more and more announcements on actual policies. This review into the ECHR makes it very clear she's completely open to leaving it, regardless of what James Cleverly says, which does make his appointment an unusual and unexpected one. But he can be very sound on other issues. Everyone has their strengths, and if they're not going to pull behind the leader, then either she's got to go or they do.
There you go. Brilliant words to end on there. Annunziata Rees-Mogg, Head of Communications for Popular Conservatism. What is Badenockism? She better decide. She better decide soon. Right, we're going to go to an advert break now before we get our teeth sunken into the final hour of the show. And I've got an amazing guest coming up after the break. The expert on Antifa, Mr. Andy No. You don't want to miss it. We're talking about those protests. That's after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is
Hello there and welcome back to the show. I've enjoyed the first 2 hours. I hope you have. If you've not been around for the whole time, it's okay. I'm not going to chastise. I'm not going to criticise. Who am I to accuse you of not tuning in when I know you wanted to? But don't you worry. We've got your backs, haven't we? Because you can go onto YouTube and watch the whole show from the beginning. And it has been a very entertaining and interesting show from this, well, from this angle anyway. I just sit there and get to speak to awesome people, don't I? Like you, like all our fabulous guests. And I enjoy myself. So if you want to go back and look at all the things we've been talking about for the last 2 hours, then you can do that any time of day on the Talk app or on YouTube. You can have a bath and I'll be there, like sitting on the loo going, all right, this is what we're going to talk about, eh? While you like knock about with your rubber ducks and your bubbles. I can join you. Or if you're sitting in a waiting room later, if you've got to do a long car journey because, you know, your nan needs some, whatever it may be, some medicines from the pharmacy, then I'll be there. You just stick me on. Put your radio on and, you know, connect it to YouTube and you can have your fill of Phillipsism. So never despair if you weren't there. Oh, there you go. It came out of a new little mantra, didn't I? Right. And also, if you want to be there right now, live, talking to me and adding to the conversation, I did a bit of a call out earlier. Want to get anybody who seems to think they know what they might know about socialism in this country. If you happen to have a beady eye on that particular movement, share your knowledge. Sharing is caring. We all get together. We throw in our 2-bit. I've got some amazing listeners who go and do some hardline Googling, like secret producers dotted around the country, coming up with facts and information, texting it through, phoning up with it. That's what we like. That's how we're going to win this fight. That is how we're going to save Britain, by working together for the good of the nation. 03444 99 1000 is the number to dial if you want to share your thoughts, your feelings or your facts. Normal network rate. You can also use that number to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp or send me a message on WhatsApp. Don't bother sending photos because they don't come up on Cape Canaveral here. You know, I have to sort of like squint like that. I can't see him. So if you're sort of going, look at this and I've got this and look at this screen grab and I'm sending you a document, that's brilliant. But while I'm on air, I can't actually look at that stuff, just read out words. 87222 is the number if you want to send me a text message. And if you do that, you've got to write the word talk before it, TALK, because I believe we probably share that number with other characters in other studios, talk about completely different things. And believe you me, you could give someone some sort of coronary if they're down there in the Rainbow Suites where they play all the pop music and, you know, love all of the progressive stuff by sending them your thoughts without a filter. Right, there you go. Let us move on now and speak to the next guest, who is brilliant. He's the author of Unmasked, Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy, Mr. Andy No. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Nigel's been referencing Antifa, saying that he thinks that some of these counter-protesters are infiltrated by some pretty militant activists. What do you make of that? When you've seen, well, we've had protests for a long time now, the pro-Palestine marches, trans rights, Just Stop Oil, climate action, whatever they're called, the ones who chuck the orange paint on stuff, BLM. Is there, do you think, a radical, dangerous, militant, destructive left-wing force in the United Kingdom as part of these particular movements?
Well, we have seen in the advertising for the counter direct actions in Epping and in other places like last year after Southport, is that whenever so-called stand up to racism and other events that are organized by Socialist Workers' Party, Antifa groups on social media will also amplify these same events and call for their comrades to come out. Now, just because there's been a history of violence with some of the militants that show up, I don't think that should prohibit these far-left radicals from having their own type of event. And I think much of the discourse around what's happened in Epping has been based on short videos that people see online that go viral that don't tell the full story.
What is the full story then?
Okay, so there was understandably a lot of anger about videos that appear to look like the police are escorting the far left protesters to the Bell Hotel where the migrants are staying. And I think the statement that was initially put out by Essex Police denying that confused a lot of people as well, because you do see them escorting the protesters there. I don't see actually a particular issue with police providing escorts for people who are wanting to engage in protected type of speech activities. I think where the breakdown in trust in wider public with law enforcement is that they see a two-tier policing. For example, whenever and this is not just in the context of what's happened in Epping, but in many other protests that are branded right-wing or people who are critical of migrants or mass migration, is that they don't get that same type of protective treatment from law enforcement. They'll be blocked from going to where they would like to protest. They'll be detained. They'll be arrested just for expressing their views one particular way. So how come when it comes to those on the far left, they get this sort of escort service and what appears to be special treatment?
Well, talk to me about Antifa and far-left movements, because you are pretty much the expert on this and spoke about, in America, Antifa's radical plan to destroy democracy. Talk to me about them as an organisation. I kind of want to know whether there's foreign infiltration, how organised they are, what their ambition is, how dangerous they are, where they get their funding from. All of that, if you can, in a nutshell. And then also, are they operative in the United Kingdom? Do we have the same problem?
So they are a movement and ideology that claims to be in opposition to fascism, but really what they're against is liberal democracy and free speech. So there's a particular irony here of where the police are protecting these people who have as part of their agenda silencing of other people. They really only exist in opposition to whatever cause of the day they claim it to be, in this particular case, to be in support of migrants, but they have also shown up to oppose women who speak out against gender ideology and trans extremism, for example. And the pillar of sort of what makes them dangerous is their modus operandi of using physical direct action, meaning physical confrontations with other people, law enforcement, or vandalism, or even killing in some very extreme cases, to further their political cause. So actually, I think the police escorting, going back to Epping, the police escorting them is actually an important part of keeping particular order, because they thrive in disorder. If there had been a situation where they had been allowed to sort of just go on their own and to fight whoever they wanted, to brawl, that happens in America in these sort of anarchy scenes. That's where they thrive. In this particular case, they were vastly outnumbered by the locals, and that's where eventually law enforcement called in their own vehicles and drove them away to the tube station or the train station to get them out. Otherwise, there could have been brawls. So actually, I think in what happened in Epping, police handled it well, actually. The goal was to keep the two sides separated. We've just seen over and over, though, that when it comes to how they keep so-called right-wing protesters separated, they are treated differently.
When you did digging into Antifa in America, did you manage to get to the bottom of how they are so well funded and what sort of connections they might have? Because we know in times past, during the Cold War and so on and so forth, we even know by some intelligence reports into things like the pro-Palestine marches and also infiltration of environmental activist groups, that you have indeed had agents and operatives from hostile countries penetrating those particular organisations to try and not just divide and destabilise our society, but to push certain radical agendas which are not going to be in our national interest. Is there any suggestion that Antifa and left-wing organisations such as Antifa are prey, essentially, to foreign interference?
So it depends on the country that they operate in. In continental Europe, in some jurisdictions where the Greens or the left party in that particular country has control of funding, there are local, literal Antifa groups that will get government funding. So there are taxpayers who get some of that money. In the United States, there exists these networks of far left extremist groups who are allies with Antifa. They call themselves anti-fascists, who operate also as nonprofits. Some of them have a lot of friends in the media as well in the Democrat Party. So there's a symbiotic relationship with the militant, violent left, with the mainstream left in power. In the UK, I would say the Antifa movement as a whole, when it comes to violence, is a bit, they've been less successful on that front compared to some other nations. And their funding, it seems to be they're more attached at the hip in terms of when there are protests with the Socialist Workers' Party, and the Socialist Workers' Party and their sister groups do have a lot of funding. You can see it in the type of materials that they get printed out, these signs and banners that are disseminated at some of their demonstrations, which can be huge, cost significant amounts of money. So just on the propaganda front, you can see where the money is being used.
Yeah, and it's like I said, they're very well organised, very well resourced. They seem to have print presses up and down the country where they can suddenly manifest a ton of placards, all identical, and hand them out like sweeties. And I just kind of think that they're a very shadowy organisation. You know, they call themselves a party, but we don't know who the leaders are. They don't seem to have any accountability. And yet they are always at the heart of disruption. They're always at the heart of protests, whether it's for Gaza, whether it's BLM, whether it's trans stuff, whether it's now migrant hotels. They're always there going against what the majority of the British people want to see happen, and have a huge amount of pernicious influence, I think. And they rather alarm me. And I don't think enough is being done to unmask them and figure out a little bit more, considering how much prevalence they seem to have.
I do notice that in the United Kingdom, there's always kind of a slow walking whenever there's a problem. And eventually when people realize that something has to be done, it's almost kind of too late. You know, there's some parallels here with the mass migration crisis. It's not like that came out of the blue. And so I think immediately the issue that's in front of us now is that there's been a huge breakdown in the relationship of the British public and law enforcement. And law enforcement doesn't do themselves any favor when they, for example, the Essex police releasing statements that contradicted what actually happened and what happened on video. And then the Metropolitan Police has a very checkered history as well, and how they deal with protests that they deem to be right-wing. So until that relationship is repaired, you're going to see distrust at every single one of these events. And unfortunately, the public needs to, for these protests to be safe, it requires a cooperation between the public and law enforcement, and that relationship's not there at the moment.
Yeah, but do we also need to dig around into some of these protest groups? Because like I said, you know, when you have so much influence, so much presence, when you're so visible, when it very much is apparent that your demonstrations do cut through, surely that they need to be held accountable. And yet I watch every single news channel, read every single newspaper, day after day after day after day after day, and I have not read one article or seen one interview that says, okay, who is this group? Who are the people behind these mass demonstrations?
Yes, these are important questions, and I don't have the answers to them. We don't know where a lot of their funding sources come from. They ostensibly operate as a political party, but also as a nonprofit. And they're not very transparent about who's backing them. In the United States, there are sort of similar groups, socialist allied groups, where, at least in American reporting, journalists have uncovered that there are billionaire socialists, and one in particular who's provided funding. I don't know if that's the particular case here, but just my observation from them on on the surface is one, you can see they're highly organized. They're at everything. They can mobilize people not just in the local jurisdiction, but get them to go distances for whatever cause, any cause. And they have the propaganda materials and the physical materials for agitation as well. And some of their supporters, members, show up to these events masked, which prevents that's a public safety issue as well.
No, I totally agree with you. I've been saying this for ages. I want to know who they are, who's behind it, where they get their money from, because if you're going to have that much of a visible presence on our streets, fighting against the will of the British people, we deserve that people ask questions of you. Andy, always brilliant talking to you. Andy Know, there, author of Unmasked: Inside Antifa's Radical Plan to Destroy Democracy. Now, remember, Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana decided they're going to set up a little political party. Oh, we called it some names, didn't we? Jezbollah, I've heard bandied about. The Fruit and Nut Party, that was a good one. They've actually decided on their nomenclature. Wait for it. They're called Your Party. Y-O-U-R, Your. I mean, obviously, they can't call it his party or her party because no doubt they're the pronoun parade as well. There are all these people who kind of believe in 25,000 genders, so maybe your covers it. Your party. Well, it's not my party. I don't want it. I don't want it anywhere near me. It's not my party. Your party. Whose party? I mean, what a stupid name. Who came up with that? Probably Magic Grandpa, one would have thought. It's not exactly very bright, is it? Anyway, they have, well, apparently it's not yet registered with the ELCOM, Electoral Commission, because people have been sniffing around and can't seem to find it there. But it's saying that on a website they've hastily shoved up that there's going to be a conference soon. Brilliant. That will keep all those Socialist Workers' Party lot distracted for a while because they'll all have to attend that one. Maybe what we need to do is give them a taste of their own medicine and have British patriots protesting outside with their Cross of St George, just like they do to all of our events. Anyway, they've the pair have signed a joint statement saying, the system is rigged. Well, yeah, we know that. Everyone knows that, mate. It restates positions like mass nationalisation of utilities. They accuse the current government of complicity in crimes against humanity. The great dividers want you to think that the problems in our society are caused by migrants or refugees. They are not. They're caused by an economic system that protects the interests of corporations and billionaires. It is the ordinary people who create the wealth, and it's ordinary people who have the power to put it back where it belongs. It's time for a new kind of party. One that is rooted in our communities, trade unions, oh, we love them, and social movements, oh, we love them too. One that builds power in all regions and nations. One that belongs to you. Well, thank you for your invitation to join your party, and I'm going to politely say you can send that back from whence it came. RSVP, Magic Grandpa. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere because after the break, we want to chat with you. 0344 499 1000. I can already see the lights on my little desk in front of me all flashing away. Looks like there's a queue of you waiting for a chit-chat, but join the line because I want to get as many opinions as possible. You can also send me a WhatsApp on that number or leave me a voice note. 87222 is the number for text messages. I'm back after this.
There is absolutely no excuse on this earth for why we are where we are 1 year into more than a year into a new government. This administration had plenty of time to prepare proper solutions to stop the boats. What's happened, in fact, as everybody knows, is that there's been a multiplier. Instead of stopping the boats, even more than ever are coming over. And for the government now to say, oh gosh, things are looking a little bit hairy.
So they basically, the police
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, Warwick from Devon. You're funny. He says, I think they meant the Yawn Party, Y-A-W-N. It is a bit yawn, isn't it? It's just the tedious sixth form policies. Don't blame the immigrants. We need all the unions. I mean, God, get on. Let's speak now to Steve, who's in Lincoln. Steve, I bet you're champing at the bit to join the Your Party. Is it your party?
No, the Super Mario Party. So I can jump over all the obstacles that the government put in my way.
Well, as much as you would like the Super Mario Party, I'm afraid all the plumbing jobs have been taken up by immigrants now, so you can't have it.
Yes. I've got loads of questions. I'm training to be Prime Minister, so I've written everything down so I can read it sort of in order.
Good. Learning from the best in the biz, Sir Keir Starmer, at reading things out. Well done.
I'll try and keep the ums and ahs out a little bit.
OK.
Right. I think we've made so many laws in order to be fair that they now contradict each other. So we can't go backwards for going forwards. This is the problem now. We've over-regulated the country.
Oh, gosh, we live in a Gordian knot of bureaucracy. One of the first things you have to learn when you go to journalism school is all the competing regulation, the right to privacy and whistleblowing and public interest, and which one is it and which one gets the most precedence. And it seems to me that for all the laws that we're churning out and creating, none of them are getting scrapped. It's just they pile up and they pile up and they pile up and they become more nonsensical. And then on top of all the laws, you've got a load of lawyers all interpreting those laws. So you've got the laws, you've got their interpretations, you've got all the cases. I mean, you're right. It's like walking around in a fog of nonsense.
And I don't think even the lawyers can interpret them properly because there's always something else contradictory.
Do you know, I heard this morning when I was listening to the radio that some clever bot wants to create a law so rivers can claim for rights, against the water company. So it wouldn't be me or you going, this is our river and, it's pickled our pets. Or I've had diarrhea for the last 3 days. No, they want to make it so a non-human entity, i.e. the river itself, can sue a water company. I'm like, great. What's going to happen next?
That's just fishing.
Ah, funny. But yeah, what's going to happen next? Am I going to have my spectacles suing me because I didn't polish them, and so I've had to put them down on the side because the glare from the lights was sort of creating smears in front of my vision? It's just, people need to just calm down and stop coming out with all this mad stuff.
Yes, but the only thing we've got left to us, because we obviously can't seem to get rid of the sitting government, is to have an old sort of Jarrow march, where half the country ups in arms and peacefully walks down the M1 to surround Downing Street with about 1 million people.
I love it. There's so many of you out there who keep saying, I think we need a national strike. We should all sort of, join up and not pay our taxes. I like the idea of a big old walk. I mean, I'm quite a keen hiker. And I love our beautiful countryside. Maybe I'd like that, actually. Yeah.
If everybody got up and showed the strength of feeling, and they won't listen any other way, they'll just wheedle out of it and never answer a question. So I actually think that we are heading for a bloodless coup by the government.
Well,
combined government.
There's something in the air, that's for sure. How it all manifests, I don't know. But I think you're right. I think it's going to be bloodless because we're British. We're not savages and we're not brutes. We tend to do things in quite a sane, stiff upper-lipped manner. So maybe it will be one big, giant national walk. Like I said, I'd be there for it. Steve, thank you ever so much. From Steve in Lincoln, let's go to David in Lincolnshire. Hello, David.
Hello, Alex.
What's on your mind, my love?
Well, earlier on you had a retired policeman who came on trying to justify why they escorted the...
Right, yeah, that was Chris in Manchester, because I've had a couple of retired policemen. But,
yeah, and then I felt really sort of annoyed by his response. But then Peter Bletchley came on, and he actually said everything I was going to say. And, you know, why can't they kettle these people? And Graham made a point earlier on about it's like taking the away fans to Millwall, you know, on match day and putting them straight in with.
Well, with all due credit to Chris, who was from Manchester, as a former serving police officer who actually was in charge of things like public disorder, he was just trying to explain to us the sort of protocols and the codes that the police use, the rule book, if you will, the manual of the dealing with manifestations. And so I really appreciate him coming and giving us those insights. Now, I don't think he necessarily was constantly banging the drum for the execution. Interestingly, Andy No, who is, you know, very critical of many things in our society, who's an expert in Antifa, he actually praised the way Essex police did things and said actually it potentially stopped things from getting unruly, the way that they handled the situation. So it's always good to get a diversity of opinions and insights, because I have my own views. Sometimes I have my own views come straight out the box, banging the drum for something, and by the end of the programme I've gone, oh, I might have moved a bit on that, which is a very healthy way to be. But certainly what concerns me when I look up and down the country is that, you know, whatever anyone says about whether Essex police were right or wrong, how they handled it, whether they were telling lies about doing the I mean, that was stupid. You know, to say we didn't do something that we have them on video doing is just stupid. But one thing that is clear is we definitely have a two-tier system. Without a doubt. I think, you know, that is now sort of set in stone, concretised. Everyone can see it everywhere.
Point Peter made was that if it was the other way round, it would have been different, wouldn't it? They wouldn't have taken them down there. They would have kettled them.
Oh, they'd have treated them like scum of the earth. If I suddenly decided to stick on a, you know, Jerry Halliwell-style Union flag dress and want to go and get in the middle of a pro-Palestine march, they ain't going to let me. Although they might say we're not going to let you for your own safety. Look, I don't understand the operations and protocols of the police force. What I do understand is actually what I think we need to do as a nation is not point the finger at the police. It's very easy to do, but a lot of policemen and women work hard, put themselves at risk in the line of duty, have a thankless job to do for not really a brilliant amount of pay, if we're going to be honest. And I think we should support and cheer for our police. I've met many a police officer who I absolutely adore. I think the buck stops with the Prime Minister. The buck stops with the wonks of Whitehall. The buck stops with the decision makers of this country, not the people who are having to act on behalf of those decision makers and carry out their requests. So I'm always a little bit hesitant about going after the police a little bit. But, you know, Essex police, it looked funny, it smelt funny. I still don't think we're at the bottom of it. I still think there are more questions that haven't been answered. So we'll just keep plugging ahead with that. David, thank you ever so much for your call, my darling. Alex, for 40 years, I was always a Conservative, but no longer. Now I am a Reform member. A massive supporter of Mr Nigel Farage, because it used to be the Conservatives who were proud British patriots and Labour were not. But now the Conservative Party shows no patriotism whatsoever. Amanda in London says it is perfectly clear to anyone with half a brain that the Labour government have no desire whatsoever to stop the illegal invasion. Their strategy now is to tarnish anyone with legitimate fears for their families' safety. What an abomination and dereliction of duty to the women and girls of this country. Cliff in Berkshire says, I left the Conservative Party when David Cameron was at the helm because his policies were incompatible with Conservative policies and views. I was not the only lifelong Conservative supporter to abandon the party under Cameron. Yeah, he was all hugger husky, wasn't he? And not hugger husky. He had photos taken with huskies and wanted to hug hoodies. Probably wanted to hug hoodies in huskies, frankly, or hug huskies in hoodies. That'd be a sight. Right, going to take a short break now because things might be kicking off here in Britain, but never like to be outdone, do they, America? It's all going off in a big way over there, so I think it's about time we caught up with some of the news on the other side of the pond, and we're going to be joined just after this break by former White House official Matthew Bryza.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, what on earth is going on with this whole Epstein-Trump thing? He made a big deal of it, didn't he? A central pillar of his presidential campaign. I'm going to publish the Epstein files. Yeah, you're going to be flushed out, everyone who is on that list. Then apparently, allegedly, he was told by his Attorney General, your name might appear a few times in that file. Then he's not publishing it anymore. Or is he? Everyone's saying, oh, yeah, it's because you were doing dirty things with Jeff, weren't you, Donald? He says, it's lies, I didn't, you're making this up, this is fake news. And then as a distraction technique, he's sort of going, right, we're going to go after Obama for talking about all this Russian stitch-up of the elections. You lied. I can't make sense of it, so let's get someone on who might be able to and speak to Matthew Byers, a former White House official. Hello there, Matthew. Right. Now, what on earth is going on with this Epstein stuff? Because I had someone say to me, look, the Biden lot had access to those Epstein files. If Trump was really named as someone doing all sorts of vile things on Lolita Island or whatever it's called, oh, they would have used it as part of the lawfare. Then other people are saying, he came out speaking a good game on publishing this stuff. Funny that he feels queasy about it, particularly people, actually, in his own camp. So what do you think is the truth?
Well, yeah, it's not necessarily the case that the Biden administration would not have published Trump's name. But it's also, would be decency. I mean, it's not the U.S. political norm to attack a previous president. But regardless, that's not even the main issue. Sure, Trump's in there. I mean, you're showing the video right now of Trump, in the past with Epstein. The issue is that Trump's own base, his MAGA movement, is furious that Trump seems to be protecting other people, maybe, that are of the elite in Washington when Trump claims to be a member of the elite that's for the little guys. So Trump is being disingenuous here, and his political base is fracturing on this.
I mean, do you think that these files are being concealed because there's going to be stuff in there that's so explosive, that's so disruptive, it's going to harm American interests? Is this about protecting a little coterie of privileged people? Or is it, which someone else suggested to me yesterday, the case that actually there's not really anything in those files, it's naff all, and it will actually, after sort of promising the world, be a bit of a disappointment if they were published?
Well, we don't know, but what we do know is that yesterday in Washington, there was a discussion in the Congress about whether to publish some of the information, and the decision was, well, we got to be careful about some of the dossiers because there is child pornography featured in it, is what was announced in Washington. So I think there's some bad stuff in there. And I think really what this boils down to is Donald Trump, when he was a candidate, first time around, promised to drain the swamp of Washington. And in fact, he's sort of filling the swamp, it seems, by protecting at least other people who are prominent, who would have terrible things written about them in those files, it seems.
Okay, so and so instead what he seems to be doing is going after the ultimate distraction technique by saying he's going to criminally go after Barack Obama. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's right. So he published a video, Trump did, an AI-generated video that shows Obama supposedly being arrested and handcuffed in the Oval Office. The dispute has to do with a report, an intelligence report put out by his director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, that claims that Obama headed a corrupt scheme to make up information about the 2016 election campaign that showed that Russia was trying to throw the election in President Trump's favor. Obama has said this is totally false, but everybody has already seen the reports of the U.S. law enforcement and intelligence services back then that said, yes, Russia did try to influence the election in favor of Donald Trump, but failed to do so. So it's really a case of there's no there. There's nothing new. And yes, as you said, Alex, it seems to be a distraction.
How are Americans taking this? Because sitting this side of the pond, it all seems really radical. One president say he's going to handcuff another former president, and is someone named in some sort of pedo dossier? It's kind of mad. It's kind of crazy stuff. I mean, how are the Americans taking this bombardment of information?
Yes, Alex, it's totally crazy, and they don't seem to be taking it well. President Trump and his Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, seem to be playing for time. Johnson has dismissed the House of Representatives a couple days early so they couldn't vote to compel the administration to release these files, hoping that during the ensuing 5 weeks that the issue will blow over. But it seems pretty clear from the meetings the members of Congress are having with their constituents back home that it's not blowing over and that the American public is furious. They're not stupid. They're seeing through this fog and smokescreen, and they really want to get to the bottom of these allegations of pedophilia by prominent Americans. So I don't think this is going to go away. They're mad. Americans are mad.
So do you think at some point those files are going to have to be published in some way, even if redacted, or is that not a possibility? Because you can't really give people half measures. It's just going to create more questions, more suspicions.
Yeah, that's what the Trump administration tried to do. They said, well, we'll release the grand jury testimony of the 2019 case that convicted Epstein. But that just wasn't enough, not even for Trump's own Republicans in the MAGA movement. They were saying, no, that information is not really where the substance lies. The substance lies in the thousands of pages of other documentation, and that must be released. And this is, again, Republicans from his own political base, Trump's own political base. So I think you're exactly right. Americans, including in Trump's congressional delegation, are seeing through the smoke screeners and are saying, you've got to release all the information.
Well, yeah, I would ask you, Matthew, where do we go from here? But the great thing about Donald Trump as president is you never quite know what's coming next.
Yeah, he's been... he has succeeded every single time when in similar trouble in deflecting. But this may be the straw that breaks the camel's back. It could be, because this is the first time his base is not simply climbing on his wagon and saying whatever he says, but they're challenging him.
OK, you say the straw that breaks the camel's back. In what way? Because, you know, he's not going to be removed from office, is he? Is it just going to be sort of a difficult, selection of midterms or something like that? Or could something more extreme happen?
That's right. He won't be removed from office. This won't lead to his impeachment or conviction of any high crime or misdemeanor. But what it may do is stop the momentum of what he has been doing, which is sort of breaking down the norms and even the regulations of the American democratic system. You know, he's attacked law firms. He's attacked judges. He's attacked a former president. And when you keep that up, you weaken the institutions of democracy. So it's possible then, if his base starts to call into question Trump's credibility, then we won't see him going after those institutions of American democracy.
Matthew, thank you ever so much. Always good to have someone try and shed some light on the mad antics going on over in America. Keeps us entertained here in Britain. And it's a bit of light relief because, believe you me, our country right now looks like a dumpster fire. So if we can be distracted by some of the more crazy and entertaining madnesses that come out of America, then thank you. We appreciate it in Britain. That was Matthew Beiser, a former White House official. We're going to be taking a short break now. Hopefully before the end of the show, we might be able to take some more of your calls as well. 0344499 1000 is the number if you'd like to phone up and have a chit chat with us. We're also going to be discussing the looming doctors' strikes. How bad are they going to be? Who's actually now got the guts to take part in them? That's what we're discussing after this.
If you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. As it were, the working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Should we do some calls before we move on to our next topic? Because one of my faves has just phoned in. She can't ever be held back or silenced. No, no, no. She's a real Boudica amidst our listeners. It's Grace in London. Hi there, Grace.
Hi.
Hello, my darling. Right, what do you want to talk about?
I've just been looking at Corbyn's new website. Now, a while ago, before I understood his support for certain groups, I thought he seemed like a nice guy, and I joined the Labour Party briefly as a member, and then I quit the Labour Party over his support for abortion. But I like his idea that wealth should be more fairly distributed. But looking at their website, one of the things they say is that they believe in the radical idea that all human life has equal value. And I really believe that personally. I think that God made all human beings with equal value, and I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind. But I just don't understand, and I've been wondering this for ages, why it is that Corbyn et al. Only talk about people in our world. They do talk about people in Britain, but they only talk about people beyond Britain when they happen to be Palestinians. And I am really concerned about what the Palestinian people seem to be going through. I'm not denying that we should be concerned about them. I just think if you really believe in the idea that all human life has equal value, why not also talk about the biggest humanitarian crisis right now, which is in Sudan? Why are they not telling our government off more for having cut overseas aid? I know a lot of listeners to this programme don't support overseas aid, but I personally find it really exciting that we can genuinely help people significantly, because it makes a lot of impact pound for pound when it's spent well. And I don't understand why so many people...
I always have it in your call, Grace, because as a fellow Christian, I sort of have to morally wrestle with some of the things I think and feel. So, for example, the migrants, coming over, because I, like you, want everybody to have a fair opportunity in life and dignity, because all human lives are of equal value. But then I kind of think, but at the same time, what you can't do is have people who mean you harm being invited into the country and enabling them. And that's the difficulty that we face here. And I sometimes find myself, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing God's work, if you will, by banging the drum against migrant hotels, saying they shouldn't be put in 4-star hotels if they're genuinely fleeing persecution? They would be happy with any sort of accommodation if it gave them sanctuary. And that would actually, to me, thin out those people who came here because they actually just want to rip the proverbial and exploit us economically, from those people who genuinely do need to get away and find some sort of salvation. And on the other hand, the flip side, I would say it's our duty, because like you, I'm not against foreign aid. I'm against the stupid big charity checks going to having some sort of drama production about pronouns in Sudan or something. That's crazy. But I'm not against whatsoever making sure people in the developing world have medications and clean water. And I've always been of the position, which is why I'm an ardent Brexiteer, that one of the greatest things Britain can do for the developing world is properly trade with them, is build up those commercial relationships. So you lift them out of poverty, you create a downflow of jobs. They're not just in agrarian toil, picking tea leaves to put on a big basket on their noggin, but are able to sit in air-conditioned offices, working out how trade relationships work and being an HR manager and all those grey-collar jobs that we enjoy in this country. So it is, but politics, religion, never should they mix. But unfortunately, when like us, Grace, you are a believer, they have to. Grace, thank you so much for your call. Let's speak now to Saeed, who's in London. Hi there, Saeed. Hi, Saeed.
Yes, hello.
Hey, there you are. Right, my dear. What is on your mind?
Look, I was listening to your interview with, I think it was a Mr. Ingram, about defense spending and how our nuclear submarines are not fit for purpose.
Right.
And I am always amazed that how come our generals and defense people are so inept at their defense spending that despite having one of the biggest budgets in Europe for defense for years and years, we still have an inability to actually defend ourselves. And then when these same generals and others ask us to double the defense spending, I feel like I would not trust them with a single more penny.
Saeed, you make a really good point there, because I've had plenty of conversations with Big Phil over a pint or two, and he pretty much says much the same thing, which is, yeah, everyone in defence would love to see the defence budget go up. We currently spend more money on servicing just the interest payments on our national debts than we do on the entire amount we spend on defence. And I would love to know, especially in such an unstable world, that we are poised and ready to protect our realm. And also poised and ready to go and protect democracy elsewhere in the world, should it be necessary. But, you know, a lot of people in the defence sector say the same thing. The way the money is being spent, the allocation of resources, the equipment being procured, it doesn't make sense. And actually, one of the big criticisms has been over the past 10, 20 years that there's been so much focus going into very necessary new forms of grey zone warfare, whether it's intelligence gathering or cyber, but potentially at the cost of actual munitions. And what we've seen when Russia invaded Ukraine is wars of attrition have not gone anywhere.
Yeah, no, I agree. And look, I think the issue we have is that the key should be defense spending, not aircraft carriers which can be used to bomb third world countries into submission. It should be about defense, and it should be all focused on that. And I think the other issue is that we continue to seem to spend on the previous war. So they would love to have the latest fighter jets. I think they went and ordered a lot of F-35s, etc. So these are not the things that we need to spend on the future conflicts that are coming. And I think that is a big mix, because I think the generals seem to get some sort of rise or excitement out of a spanking new aircraft carrier or a submarine, which frankly will not be particularly useful if the Russians want to do something in mainland Europe. So,
mind you, a few F-35s under our belt can go a long way with their bunker buster bombs and their air agility. Although someone was saying to me, because I'm a big fan of military aircraft, being a weirdo, and I was at Fairford Air Show, and I was told actually that when they organised a dogfight between the Eurofighter Typhoon, which is now, how old's the Eurofighter Typhoon? It's about 30, 40 years old these days. When they put the Eurofighter Typhoon up against the F-35, which is, like you said, a radical sort of, current generation fighter aircraft, the Eurofighter still won. So there you are. We made a good piece of kit back in the day with our European neighbours, and we're in development of making Tempest with the Italians and the Japanese. So I'm keenly following that project, because nothing pleases me more than a nice bit of kit doing cool manoeuvres in the sky. Saeed, thank you ever so much. Really interesting conversation there. Just going to read a few of your messages now. Alex, love our boys in the armed forces, but what do they expect them to do? Tickle each other to death with tickling sticks like Ken Dodd on steroids? That's according to Esme. Well, there you go. Exactly. If we're going to send our men and women into dangerous situations, or be ready at any moment to be put in dangerous situations, we better make sure they've got the tools they need to get the job done. Let's go now to our final story of the day, which is the looming doctors' strike, which is due to take place, but it's being reported that actually it might be the lowest picket line turnout yet, because even the doctors themselves are beginning to realise they're sounding, the BMA and these militant activists are sounding a bit nutty with their demands. Wes Streeting said, we're not going to give you any more money. We can't do that. He gave them an option to potentially claw some pension money in as income instead. His final offer to try and appease them, which I don't quite understand, was offering them cheaper lunches. Cheaper lunches? Anyway, let's speak now to Dr. Lawrence Buckman, who's a GP and former chair of the BMA's GPs Committee. Lawrence, I have heard various people criticise the BMA, even sort of big figures, veterans in the medical profession like Lord Robert Winston has turned around and left the BMA in protest at some of these demands. But still there are doctors saying, no, we want 30% on top of the 30% we've already got. Is it reasonable for them asking for that money?
No.
Okay, right, very resolute. Why?
Well, I've also left the BMA recently, and I don't think doctors striking against patients is ever a good idea. You're going to have to talk to people eventually. You might as well start talking now. There is a deal to be done, and it's almost certainly not going to be cash in hand for your month's work. And if you're going to have to come to a deal, you might as well start negotiating and see how you can find a package of measures that will increase what doctors take home without giving them a cash payment. And there's plenty of ways around the margins of their contract to do that. And Wes Streeting made some offers, particularly one about forgiving student loans, although that has all sorts of implications for other students who would also want to be forgiven, and changing NHS pensions, another thing that you could do that's been suggested by Wes Streeting. And it seems to me the door is open, and to kick it open further by demanding that you'll go on strike if you don't get a very large pay rise, I think is very unfortunate.
I mean, one of my arguments would be this. I would love it if we lived in a country where the economy was so booming that we could pay doctors, and personally especially nurses, a lot more than we do, because they can go over to work in countries like the UAE or Australia where they might get a bigger pay packet and potentially a nicer quality of life and modern kit, I don't know. But when you enter into public service, you know full well what your pay packet's going to be. It's publicly available. So when you sign up to being a junior doctor, I would imagine you do so knowing that the first sort of however many years of your career are going to be a hard slog, long hours while you learn the ropes. You're not going to be earning as much money as you hoped, and you are going to be lugging around some student debt, but you do so in the expectation that down the line you get to then be a consultant and have, you know, a nice big mortgage that you can afford, and are then, you know, well recompensed for the service that you've done on behalf of the country. So I don't really understand why it seems to be so many young doctors and junior doctors who are complaining when, you know, it's like when you start out in journalism, they pay you in peanuts if you're lucky. Most places want you doing the job for free if you're up for it. I don't really understand why there isn't this sense of delayed gratification.
Well, you've made my case. I don't disagree with you. And I think it is unfortunate that they're going to hope that the British public are going to swallow another big pay rise. I think they are right to say that their pay has not kept up with inflation. That's true. But there are ways of sorting out what they take home that doesn't include striking against patients. And I just think we didn't go into it for that. Doctors, as you say, should not be amazed that when they start in life, the income is really not good. It's better than it was when I was a junior doctor, but it's still not brilliant. The bit of the NHS I work in hasn't had a pay rise for years. If they want to give me one, I won't complain. But I'm certainly not going to go on strike over it. And I think if that's the only solution you've got to any problem, then you really have run out of ideas, and you have to try and harder to find solutions within a budget that you know is finite. And
should there be some way of penalising the people who are going on strike? Because my understanding is, and I could be wrong on this because I'm not from the profession, so I just sort of hoover up bits of things that I hear other people say. My understanding is these people who have gone on strike can essentially mitigate any loss of earnings by in the future just agreeing to do loads of overtime and being paid handsomely for sort of making up those hours in the future. Is that fair, or is that what happens?
No, I think that's unfair. I think people who go on strike are allowed to do that. They're currently legally, they're allowed to withdraw their labour, and I don't think I would take that away from them. I just don't think doctors and other healthcare workers should do this within a public health service to patients. I just think there's a moral argument that says you shouldn't do this. But penalising them, no, I don't think that would be fair unless you're going to penalise every single person who withdraws their labour. What you have to do is make it mitigate against it as much as you can. I agree that giving someone a big cash bung when they return to work in order to cover the work, I think that's not right. But their consultant colleagues are going to have to work very hard and will be very stressed by it, to have to do very much more work. And I understand why they say, if you don't pay us, we won't do it. And that's, you know, we're not working, it's not a charity, we're not working for nothing. But I think the whole process of moving from negotiation to crisis, engineering that seems to me to be a very strange way of conducting what will ultimately have to be another negotiation. And if you're going to have to do that, you might as well start now.
Right, exactly. It's far easier to sit and talk and be realistic and pragmatic than constantly throw grenades into the mix. Dr. Lawrence Buckman, GP and former chair of the BMA GPs Committee. Hello, Ian. Do you want to hear something hilarious?
Say again?
Do you want to hear something hilarious?
Tell me something hilarious.
Yeah, OK. So you know Zara Sultana and Jeremy Corbyn have set up some sort of party.
The dynamic duo.
Yeah, the dynamic duo. Yeah. And we heard there was rumours that she had sort of announced it before he was ready, that they're already fighting and disagreeing.
That's right. Yeah.
Apparently they've created some sort of website and they've launched it under the moniker of Your Party.
Oh,
Your
nice.
Party.
Yeah, that's very good.
Anyway, Politics Joe have put up a picture. Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana have made a joint statement on the foundation of their new